I am in a hotel room in DC. I saw the swearing in of our new Senator Welch today and attempted to see Becca Balance sworn into the House, but they're still trying to figure out who their speaker will be. So she has not yet been sworn in. So hopefully that'll happen soon. So I will start with any open comment that is not relevant to our agenda tonight.
Can I have a couple quick comments? First, your lighting is awesome. It looks like you're in a studio.
It's a very modern hotel, I'm sorry.
And just a little tidbit, Senator Welch is only the second Democratic senator elected from Vermont in the history of the state. It's just kind of unusual when you think about it.
Yes.
Just a quick thing. I mentioned this at the beginning of the last meeting as I was driving in tonight. I was going down Bridge Street. I almost hit a pedestrian crossing the crosswalk between the Big Spruce and the Hatchet. These people were using the crosswalk, but they did not use the blinky blink crosswalk lights. And I was driving slowly and I was paying attention and I still almost hit them because it's dark, it's raining, lighting there is so horrible. So just a friendly reminder, pedestrian safety, if you're using the crosswalk, please, please, please use the crosswalk lights and cross safely. That's all I have. Anybody else? June, looks like we're good. I will be quiet now.
All right. Any additions or deletions to tonight's agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move along. We will start with consideration of approving the bond vote for the Waterline replacement project. And actually, I'm going to hand this over to you, Josh, to talk about this.
Okay. So this is a waterline replacement project that would replace waterline on Tilden Ave, parts of Bridge Street south of the bridge, and parts of Cochrane Road. It's coming to the select board for approval because the select board is the body with the bonding authority since it's backed by the full grand list of the town. However, in practice, the actual payback of the bond would be borne and paid back by the water and sewer users. We'll have documents explaining that a bit more as we get closer to the vote so that people understand sort of the ins and the outs of this. This was discussed at a water and sewer meeting just prior to this meeting. It was noted, and I'm going to share my screen, there was noted one edit that the commission suggested, and that is looking here at the necessity resolution in the third portion of it that says, talks about the water line. If you look everywhere else, it talks about estimated or not to exceed. This says neither. So we would suggest to put estimated here. So it would be at an estimated aggregate cost of $1,900,000, just to keep it consistent with the rest of the documentation. Other than that, the commission voted to recommend that the select board does approve the water line vote. And I guess one other footnote on this, we are working with the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, which would provide 50% forgiveness of this loan as well. So even though it's for $1.9 million, hopefully that would be reduced by about half or exactly half. And that's, of course, an estimate on the engineer's estimate. We will wait to get exact bids, and this project probably wouldn't be bid until next fall or winter, because by the time we're kind of ready to go out to bid, it would be spring, almost summer of this year, and that's not a good time to go to bid for a waterline project.
Thank you. Any questions from the board?
I have one. How do we make it clear that while we need to request the ability to borrow the full amount, we're intending to not pay more than half the amount? How do we get that message across better than just a sentence buried in this resolution?
Yeah, Jeff, that's a good question. And what I'll do is I'll put together a sort of frequently asked questions document about this bond vote. And we'll also have a public information hearing, which will be the same day that on March 4th that we're doing the information hearing for town meeting. So we'll attempt to get people well informed of that even prior to voting starting, which would happen probably, I think, 20 days before March 7th. So we'll get ahead of that and provide better information. Yeah, I agree. The resolutions can be a bit dense to read and not super clear.
And that's the case with almost all of our bond our bond votes is that they're reduced by any grants that we might obtain. It probably, will you be doing any information on Front Porch Forum prior to, this vote?
I think.
Yeah,
this-
we'll put it on Front Porch Forum. We'll put it in a few different meetings. And it is in the ballot. It says subject to reduction available by state and federal grants and aid and other financial assistance. But we'll be more clear about exactly what we have in the works right now.
Yeah, the 50% or 800,000 would be good to note in some fashion, whether it's there or elsewhere.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other questions?
June, this is Bart, one other comment, and this is as much to David and the Water Sewer Commission. So moving forward, the Water Sewer Commission is a somewhat different budget cycle. So one of the things that commission is going to have to do in preparation for the next fiscal year is to look at reserve funds and budget and planned expenditures, similar to what we've done on this select board, and contemplate what are our targets for reserve funds for various purposes.
Right, so the amount that we'll bond for will be less any reserves that we might spend as well.
If we make that choice, that's a TBD, in my opinion.
Will you make that before, that decision before town meeting?
No.
Good question.
Really, no?
The fiscal year doesn't line up, plus we usually do budgeting shortly after town meeting. Right? To put it before the users in May.
Be helpful to have, at least get an indication of what that might be. Just suggesting.
And further down the road, this is somewhat off topic, but we will probably be adjusting our line replacement repair budgeting to make it less with this new line online as well. I imagine we'll anticipate fewer repairs and budget accordingly.
As the system gets closer to 100%
Yeah, we're good.
modern lines, presumably, and we've seen that in some lines historically, just for clarity for this select board. Some lines it would have leaks once or twice a year, now it's 0.
That's awesome.
And those weekend leaks are typically 10 grand or so.
Yeah.
That's
I'll
a
bet.
common
Yeah.
price.
For
So
many years, we were spending more on East Main for line repairs than we have been on the bond to replace the line
awesome.
since the replacement.
I'm assuming that we have no more wooden pipes.
Not that we know of, but we never know what we find when we start
Good.
digging.
Good.
like that little,
I'm gonna bring us back to the bond vote issue. So, are there other questions from the select board?
No.
Any questions or comments from the public?
Kara?
Kara?
Kara Labounty, can you hear me? Okay, June?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. The question I have, is attached to Jeff's comments. I didn't really, I honestly didn't read the full documents like Bart did previously and caught some errors about the estimate thing. Is it clearly understood in this documentation that this bond vote is being done by the town of Richmond on behalf of or for water and sewer? So it doesn't appear to anybody that the town is now going to own these new lines, these updated lines, versus the water and sewer still retaining it. And I just want to make sure when you do the facts with the questions and answers that be really clear on that. That it's I know you have to explain to the voters every time you do a bond vote for water and sewer. I understand that piece, but I just mean be clear that it's on behalf of water and sewer. And I don't think it said it in that ballot documentation that
Right.
you just.
Thank you, Kara. Yes, we have talked about this in the past as well, that because it's a bond vote, it goes to all voters. The repayment of the bond is really on the water sewer users. So I think you're right. I think we need to do a really thorough job of educating everyone on this vote so that they know, where the money is coming from, what the money is for, and who's going to be paying back this bond. Josh, did you want to add to that?
I think
No,
one
I
of the
think you nailed it.
June, I think one of the easiest explanations for people to actually understand what you're talking about is that basically the bond vote means the town's co-signing.
Oh, yeah, that's a very good analogy. Thank you.
Everybody understands what a co-signer is.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that we're paying the bill of who's signing up to pay the bill. It means that if they default, we're responsible. And that's why it goes to all of the town.
That's a good analogy.
Sure.
Jeff, did you have something?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay. All right. Any other comments? Okay, looking for a motion.
I move to adopt the necessity resolution and declaration of official intent for the Waterline replacement project on Tilden Avenue and portions of Cochrane Road and Bridge Street.
This is David. I'll second.
Thank you. Any further comment or questions? Okay, please state your name and your vote.
This is Jay, I.
This is Jeff, I.
Bard, aye.
David, I.
And June, aye. Thank you. Moving on to consideration of finalizing the FY 24 budget to be considered for approval by the voters at town meeting. And we've been talking about this since October. So are there any, it looked good to me. We have made a lot of changes since we started this conversation and went from a 19 point something% increase in taxes to 3.96, is that right? Percent. So any questions on this budget to present at town meeting?
I would just like to call attention to the fact that the expected raise in taxes is actually less than inflation. So that was not easy to do, but it looks like we're going to manage that.
Yes. 3.67. So we did a lot of sharpening of the pencils over the last 3 months. Any questions or comments from the public?
Thank you for sharpening your pencils.
You're welcome.
It's about half inflation.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the town staff, Connie, Josh, and us, and the department heads did a good job of prioritizing what was essential and not paying for any $25 hammers. Although nowadays, I guess a $25 hammer is cheap.
Typical hammer.
Yeah, but back, remember 1979, it's like you're spending how much money on a hammer? Okay, the $500 toilet seat. We didn't buy any $500 toilet seats.
Okay, then we're looking for a motion.
This is Bard. I move to approve the FY 24 budget as presented to be included for consideration of approval by the voters at our town meeting.
June, this is David. I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, please state your name and your vote.
This is Jay, I.
This is Jeff, I.
Bard, aye.
David, I.
June, aye. Thank you. Moving right along. Discussion of, hold on. I have two different
Parking group.
schedules here. Hold on. Discussion of placement of radar speed feedback signs.
No, this
the
is
parking advisory.
presentation from Parking Advisory Committee. On
Oh,
Dugway.
right. I made a note beside that. Thought we'd already done it. Presentation from Parking Advisory Committee on Dugway Road parking suggestions. So the Parking Advisory Committee has given us a lot of really good information. So thank you for that work. And they're looking for feedback on this plan. And I think since we got our packet, we've had an additional email with some suggestions. So I am going to, Josh, going to hand this off to you, or do we have someone from the Parking Advisory Committee present? I don't know.
Yeah, I believe that is Kevin McAleer here or Chuck Gilroy. I think they were the two, or maybe there's another representative of the parking committee.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're
Oh, they're
here.
here in person. There we go.
Yeah.
I'm going to mute myself and turn it over to you guys.
Okay, thanks. So hi, I'm Kevin Mackler, I'm Chair of the Parking Advisory Committee, met before. Here to kind of have a discussion and, answer any questions about the recommendation we have for Dugway Road. Over the last year, done a lot of discussions in our committee meetings, a lot of feedback. We did a survey of residents on Dugway Road. We've engaged the stakeholders, as we pretty much outlined in the memo here. And as a result of that, we have some recommendations about how to improve the parking situation. We also had a summer where we got to observe it firsthand and see the challenges of that road. And by no means is there some easy solution for that road. So, but I did want to just kind of open up the floor to just have any discussions about what we presented so far. And I think one of the benefits of the outreach that we did, we also got Chuck Gilroy here, a Dugway Road resident, to join our committee as well. So that's been really beneficial too. So the short of it is we're recommending a consideration of an ordinance change that prohibits parking on the uphill side, which is the opposite of the riverside, from, mile marker. What was it?
0.5 roughly.
Yeah, 0.5 to 1.8, which covers the windiest part of the road. And I think one of the observations we made during this year was really when the parking is a problem is that you have parked cars on either side of the road, and there's a little bit of a decision point for each of the motorists on what's the travel lane or not. And by removing that option of parking on that uphill side, which is where the majority of the residents are, we will always be maintaining or be trying to at least maintain that 2 lanes of traffic along that busiest, windiest section of the corridor. Diane was nice enough to put some pink ribbon on where those locations are. So if you are in the area, you can drive and see where that is. But essentially, if you're driving up from Cochrane Road, there's a long stretch of parking that's heavily utilized in the summer. And we wanted to maintain those spots. So what we did was we actually did a survey. We walked this corridor a number of times and identified all of the parking areas along the corridor on each side where a car could reasonably get off of the traveled lane. And one of the conclusions we came to was really the majority of that safe off-street parking was actually on the downhill side. So by removing that uphill side parking, we're creating that opportunity for 2 lanes of traffic, but also still maintaining the majority of the legal off-road parking. Chuck, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's good. I think what we have to understand about the geography of Dugway Road is that the first half a mile from the Cochrane Road tends to be flat, straight, very steep down to the river. Not really a parking issue there. As the road starts to rise, not only does it rise, but it becomes more windy. And it's the triple witching hour where it's the best access to the river, it's the most densely populated, and it's the worst lines of sight.
Right.
As far as the road is concerned. That runs up until, as a reference, Aldrich's Tree Farm. And at that point, the road flattens back out again, a straight run to the Huntington Road.
Right.
So we're proposing that kind of where that starts the uphill and runs just short of Aldrich's, that on the right-hand side, that would be a no parking zone. We want to call it an emergency lane or something like that. At the worst case, this summer, we had 161 cars parked on Dugway Road. The great majority of them were on that 2-mile stretch in the middle. When they tow cars, so Richmond PD last year wrote all but 1 ticket, parking ticket, was written on Dugway Road for the entire town. Got to the point last year, they ran out of tickets on Dugway Road and they were handing out photocopies. It's a significant problem. We sit there, we watch cars get towed all day long. The residents, when we did the survey, 81% of them said the number one concern they had was emergency vehicle access.
Right.
So this is so much more than a parking issue as far as, oh, I don't want these people parking in my front yard. I don't want to see their cars. This is a public safety issue.
It is, yeah.
These folks that live on the road should have every expectation that police, fire, and rescue can get to their houses. And boy, 3 months out of the year, it doesn't happen.
Right.
They can't have that expectation. And we've got to change that.
Right.
By doing this emergency lane on the uphill side for 1.8 miles. Both Pete and the police department and us agree we're giving up 5 viable parking spaces. That's it. We're not gutting the parking by any means. We're taking 5 places that by coincidence, some of the residents say when those places are used, they can't see out of their driveway well enough to pull out. So I think this is a very small price for us to pay with on the safety side of things, a very large return.
Right. The tricky thing is going to be enforcement, as it always is, but that doesn't mean you just give up. It's hard to enforce. I've been in Dugway Road plenty of times where people will leave the bare minimum they think can get a car through. And the thing is, what a car can get through and what a fire truck can get through are not the same thing. You just can't make, and if people won't use common sense, we kind of have to do it for them.
I think you make a good point, and we have support of Richmond PD, Richmond Rescue, Richmond Fire, the town constable. Pete has approved this. Richmond Rescue's comment was that we're terrified to go to Dugway Road in the summertime.
Right.
And they often have to.
We can't have that.
And I
Yeah.
think if this was adopted, well, there's signs there now that are, they're by the trust, but I don't think that they carry the regulatory type of sign
Right.
message. So if we adopt an ordinance and we work with Pete to develop a regulatory sign that really says no parking, like
You will be towed.
you will be towed.
Right.
And then, these are all the details we're working through, but essentially, we're thinking about what would the sign placement be, what would be the, frequency of the signs. But then also at either side of that corridor, there would be another more of a, message sign saying new parking, in effect, you will be towed, like to really make sure that there's no question that this is going to be strictly enforced.
Right. And explaining this in French form will help, but unfortunately it won't help the people who most need it, which are the people coming from out of town.
Yeah.
And them, it's gonna be almost impossible to do enough education to make them say, this applies to me. And at that point, that's when we start towing.
Are there other questions or comments from the select board?
June, this is Bart. So a couple of things. First, I think, thanks for your work on this, because, for having been up there over decades. I also reminded people, I had to look this up again, the definition of Dugway, right? The definition of Dugway is a road constructed along a hillside by using the fill on the downhill side, material that's been excavated on the uphill side. So you basically take a hillside and you try to move it around a little bit. So
cool.
essentially it's stuck on the side of a hillside, which is why we have some of the problems and why it's so small in the midst of that steep terrain. So I think it's a really good solution. It seems to me we have a couple of things to do. This is still somewhat conceptual, but to move this to ordinance language, I guess my question is, June, Josh, how quickly can we move it to ordinance? Because there's a whole process to move through an ordinance and approval of the ordinance to signage. So, and I'm sensitive that we're in 2023 and summer 2023 will get here faster than we think.
Josh, can you answer that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree, Bart. I think we want to move this as fast as we can because it probably takes 2 months or so by the time we put the ordinance forth, do the hearings and get it approved, and then have I think it's a 45-day waiting period. So, Kevin, why don't maybe you and I and maybe a couple other members try to catch up this week or next and start to kind of craft that ordinance. If we could have something ready for the next meeting in January, I think that'd be great. I don't think these are a lot of changes. So I think we could probably do something, if not by that meeting, certainly by the first one in February.
And we did get some feedback on this proposal regarding the homes on the downhill side, like having some restriction around the driveways. And because there is concern that people don't understand what travel portion of the road means, and there's such a small shoulder. So Kevin and Chuck, have you seen that feedback that we got?
I have not seen that email.
Okay, something I think.
No.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Nope.
Oh,
It was from Karen Yang.
yes.
So
Kevin,
this is what I'd ask is if we can put these together in a proposed ordinance language, and then if we need to, we can refine or tweak the language at that meeting, but just trying to expedite it to get to the point of ordinance, approve the ordinance, move forward with hearing.
One suggestion I might have, Jeff, is seeing as we don't have a town planner to help draft an ordinance right at the moment. You might get some help from VLCT.
Right.
Any
Carol
other,
Labonte has her hand up.
Udin?
Kara,
Oh, Kara?
Just a couple,
Thank you.
just a couple, I know you can't see the side of the room, so they have to tell you, sorry. Just a couple of questions on, we already have existing ordinances that have street areas where it's no parking. And in the past, the police department have said that there were potentially some issues and not enforceable. So I'm just asking that you confirm with the interim chief and Vermont Leagues of Cities and Towns and beyond to make sure whatever ordinance is created is 100% enforceable. And if the ordinance is no parking, you will be towed. It's different than ticketing.
Mhm.
And I really strongly recommend tow, because you tow, they're not gonna park there next time.
Mhm.
You ticket, yeah, they're probably gonna park there next time. And if there was an issue with the other parking ordinances that just needed a little bit of tweaking or updating, we could do it all in one. Since you're getting Vermont Leagues of Cities and Towns to prove something or do something, I just am saying clean up those other, because at the base of West White Hill, there's an area that's supposed to be there was certain areas that were no parking already. That
Right.
enforce those.
Right.
Thank you. Totally support those.
Thank you, Kara. Any other comments?
Chuck has a comment.
Yes.
John Franken from the Parking Advisory Committee. I appreciate that there are downhill residents or any downhill resident that is concerned about people blocking access to their driveway or their view. But the committee has done a careful quantitative analysis and determined that there are 40 spots on the downhill side. And so if additional restrictions were put in to the downhill side, I think it would be beneficial to get done in a quantitative manner and figuring out, would we be eliminating what are clear off the traveled portion of the road's spots, rather than just come up with a number and say you can't park within 30 feet of a driveway or something.
That's a good point.
Just a little bit
Thank
to Kara's
you.
point. Another thought we'd like to talk about, and we'll just kind of give you the teaser tonight, is that presently our parking tickets are $25.
Mhm.
If I go to Burlington for the day, I spend $25 in a parking fee.
Mhm.
So we feel that that's not a great detriment to people parking. And as you mentioned, the towing is a great thing. But I think we should also consider raising our fines. We contacted all the neighboring towns. And either they don't have a parking ordinance or they cite the state parking ordinance. And the state parking ordinance fine runs between $47 and $259, depending on expired meter or parking in the police chief's spot. I don't know. But I think we should also consider that. I don't know how long it's been since we bumped that up again, but I think anything we can do to make people want to stay on the straight and narrow, the better.
Yeah,
I
that's
looked
a-
at Bart because Bart's usually the person I look to say, when did we last do that? And Bart
He's a
said,
long time.
so yeah, definitely, we should, I don't know. It's another thing to go through the legal motions of, but I think definitely $25 is basically,
That's cheap.
that's a permit at that point. You're just,
Yeah.
here's my fee.
That's what it costs to go swimming.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm just gonna share a story from long ago. At one point, the parking tickets in Burlington were $3 and they went to $6. And at that point, it was like, $3. It was
I will
like,
say Burlington has better enforcement of collection.
but now they've gone up and they collect better. So to your point, I think we should examine what's the right fee, and I think it is higher than $25.
In my mind, I think a lot of the people that are violators, forgive me for this, are students at UVM. You should look at UVM's parking tickets. They're $150 to $300.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. They
That you
are.
feel.
sounds good to me.
I got you down on that, Jay.
Oh, yeah.
One last small point on the uphill parking too, is that, there might be parking on the uphill side now that's viable, but when Pete does his ditching, which is necessary maintenance to maintain the life of that roadway, those could come and go as well. So it's just another important caveat to consider. Like, there might be a little bit of shoulder place to park now, but if additional ditching is done, those can be much more come and go spots.
So there is one spot, down, where the lower gorge is, what I call lower gorge?
Sure.
On the uphill side there, below the houses, are those the 5 spots you're talking about?
That's a great point, Jeff. We made a point of, because everybody likes that.
Yeah.
Pete says that's good.
Yeah.
The acting chief says that's good.
Yeah.
So that is the last spot that really on the uphill side is thumbs up.
Okay,
And it runs all the way up to just before Aldrich's Tree Farm. There's another nice spot.
yeah,
Just past Yagi's house.
Yeah.
That nobody has a problem with. So we're kind of keeping those two in
threading
there.
the needle here.
Yeah, and just eliminating the few little, and it just seemed like. We think this is gonna make enforcement easier.
Yeah.
Because that traveled portion of the road thing,
Yeah.
I gotta get that explained to me.
Well, it's
My
subjective.
kids don't know what that means.
Right. No parking is no parking. Travel portion of the road. It would seem obvious, but it's not.
No,
We could put fog lights on it.
On a dirt road?
They did it on Kenyon, right?
drag your heels.
So one other comment I'd make, at various times in related matters, we've said, let's not only tell people what we don't want them to do. Let's tell them what we do want them to
Really
do.
good point.
So it seems to me it's a combination of parking here, no parking here.
Yeah.
Which is more illustrative, because otherwise, if there's no sign, I guess you guess.
Yeah.
But I personally think we should contemplate both. Don't do this, do that.
John Cohen has done a wonderful job with a map
Mhm.
that you can access with your phone at some point in time. And it actually says, 6 to 8 cars here, 3 to 4 cars here. And kind of gives you an idea of what you can do there, and also kind of puts a limit on it. One of the suggestions that Pete had that was a good one was the land trust does these great signs that say this is good, this is bad.
Yeah.
It shows what on and off the road is. But maybe they could bump that up a little bit and actually have it pertain to the parking area that you're standing at when you see the sign.
Yeah.
Because you look at it, you go, okay, so there's room for 3, but not 4. Well, that's a representation. It's not the spot you're standing at. I guess the other piece we felt was really important was that when all these things go through it, I think it's important that we think it's important that the Richmond put out some kind of a press release. Last year, Channel 3 News did a wonderful story on the beaches are closed, go to the Huntington River. I wanted to hang, that was not.
It was
good
very
news for us,
effective.
Nobody said, oh, by the way, you're gonna get towed.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's a good suggestion. We just have to infect the river with this Listeria and E. coli and stuff. Parking problem solved,
No, we
right?
don't. We just need to put a sign up that says.
Exactly.
We used to have plenty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my final comment on signs, in a lot of cities, you see parking to the left of this sign with an arrow, parking to the right of this sign with an arrow. The more clear we are about where you can park and where you can't park, I think better compliance we're likely to get. Coupled with a painful ticket
Yeah.
and towing.
And I think this is a great first step. We still have a lot of work to do. But this is a really good discussion to kind of get this moving in the right direction. But all of those little details will come into play once we get an ordinance. So thank you very much for all the work you've done on this.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for taking time to hear us.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you for taking the time to put it
Thanks.
together.
Any other questions for Kevin or Chuck before they leave the table? All right, thank you.
Well, thank you, folks. We appreciate the work.
Great work.
Thank you.
Now, discussion of placement of radar speed feedback signs, which we have been talking about for a while, but they have arrived. And now we need to have some conversation on where they will get set up. And I know, Josh, you have gathered some information. We know we've talked a number of locations, including Route 2, but I'm going to have you go into that conversation of the process for Route 2.
Sure. Why don't I give a bit of an overview just to sort of set the table for this? So we've got 4 new pole-mounted radar speed feedback signs that have arrived, and they're ready to be mounted. Where we currently have signs, we have 2 on Cochrane Road, 1 on the Jonesville end, facing traffic as it comes into the 25-mile-an-hour zone. We have 1 on the Round Church end of Cochrane Road, again, facing traffic as it comes into the village area where it drops to 25. And we have one on Jericho Road as you're coming down Jericho Road towards the school from the north, flashes your speed there. I followed up with Chief Herrick today a bit about the operational abilities of those signs. I know that there's a couple, the one on Jonesville side and on the Jericho Road, that we're going to get the battery tested to see if the battery needs to be replaced. And we figured out that the batteries can go to Interstate Battery and we can get them tested there and get replacements there if need be. And we're working on a new battery for the west end of Cochrane Road. So I know those projects have dragged on a bit. It's a bit of a challenge to actually get to the battery, but we're working on those right now. So that's an update of where we currently have them. We could place the 4 signs pretty much in any town road where the select board would see fit. As far as the Route 2 process, there's a couple of steps that we have to go through. So we have to gather speed data where we want to put the signs. We can do that with the radar speed feedback cart that we have, which has also been out for repair for quite some time. Chief Herrick is going to follow up on that to find out if we can let it fly under them and get that back to us. But once we have that, we can install that in the area on Route 2 where we want to have the sign. Then we have to show that the 85th percentile of actual speed is 3 miles per hour over the posted speed limit. It also has to be where a speed transition exists. So where we go from, I think it's 45 on Route 2, and then you come into the village and it's at 35. So show that it's happening at that speed transition. And then the posted speed has to be 35 miles per hour or less. So if the board is interested in doing something on Route 2 or 2 signs on Route 2, it's just a matter of getting that speed cart back, filling out a simple 1111 permit with VTrans. Once we get that data back from the speed cart, then that will go to VTrans and go through. I'm not sure how long the process will take, but there'll be a process nonetheless for them to review that data and then approve putting up pole mounted signs.
June,
you,
it's Bart, a quick question. So I wasn't clear. Is for these 3 bullets, all of these conditions or one of these conditions?
Is it and or?
Yeah, I think all of them, we have to meet all of them, but I don't think that's a problem. I mean, where we're looking to do it would be where people are coming into the village. This posted speed limit 35, I think, in the village, and 3 miles per hour over the speed limit doesn't seem like a high threshold. So yes, all of us do that.
Are there questions from select board members?
Yeah, so let me see if I understand that. This is Jeff. So if we wanted to put, I'm assuming that we're going to want to put at least two of these on Cochrane Road, one in Jonesville and one, on the village side. I mean, that's where we have the most interest in this, and it would collect data, so it would serve 2 functions. Can we do that now, or do we have to conduct a speed study before we can do that?
Right. So if they're on a town road, we don't need a speed study. We only need the speed study if it's on the state road. So we could put 2 on Cochrane Road as soon as we can get them mounted.
Right. So you were talking about what we already have on Cochrane Road, that we've got signs that are there that are not currently functioning. But those signs, even when they're functioning, don't collect data, right?
Correct.
Actually, I think Chief Herrick has more to add on that. We were talking today. I think that they do collect data, but I'll let Chief Herrick expand.
Oh.
So the 2 that are on Cochrane Road currently both collect data. The one that is on Jericho Road, I have not opened the box, so I don't know for sure, but I suspect that one also collects data. The hurdle to using or obtaining that data is that these boxes are 12 feet in the air and I can't get to them. So when the new signs are put up, one of the things I'm going to ask is that as the new signs are being put up, the display panel portion of the sign be placed lower to the ground so that I have easier access to them. And then also I'm going to get with Highway Department and see if we can swap the actual speed limit sign with the feedback sign portion on the 3 that we already have existing, to swap those top and bottom so that we can access those as well. But at least 2 of the 3 do collect data, and I suspect the third one does too. It's kind of a standard thing with that brand to add that on. It's not terribly expensive when you're purchasing the sign. So I assume that that's on there as well.
So, Chief Herrick, when you open a box, how do you get the data?
Sorry. There is a small module about the size of a deck of cards that plugs into it. And you remove that from the speed sign and you use a computer program to read the data. And it's very, very simple, very non-complicated data. It just records a date, a time, and a speed for each car that goes by, up to, I'm not exactly sure off the top of my head. I believe it's 10,000 vehicles. And then at 10,000, the module is full. But as you can imagine, it takes more than a few days to get to 10,000 on Cochrane Road.
So is there a recommendation of how often you check them so that that is something that is sort of part of the routine?
Recommendation from who?
Well, if we're collecting data, we should be having some metrics to measure what to do, what we're looking for from the data. And so I'm also kind of confused as to why in this day and age, you have to actually go to the box to get the data, as opposed to having it, come to your iPhone. I don't know.
No, there is an option to do that. It's the difference between, $200 and $2,000 to have it either be the module or the Bluetooth connection.
Got it. Okay. Well, I think we should put some plan in place, like particularly now, because we want to have this data, like how often should we collect it and sort of evaluate what we're going to do with it. Jay?
So I like collecting the data. I'd love to see that data on a regular basis, but to continue back to putting them on Cochrane Road, I think that one place that we don't currently have a existing speed sign is as you're passing the round church going east on Cochrane Road. The people who come up Huntington Road and just go barreling down Cochrane Road, I think they could really benefit from having their speed and a big flashing blue sign to put the fear of the Lord into them. That would be one place in particular I'd like to see it, to protect the people who live between the round church and the cemetery. Yeah. The sign going from the cemetery toward the round church is there, but I think we need one basically as soon as you pass the round church, you should be seeing that. I think that's the number one place I would put one.
I think I agree with that.
Can I ask a question on that, Jay?
Sure.
I agree with you. Is that okay, June, if I ask a question on that area so I make sure we understand? The speed where they're coming from is coming off the Huntington Road.
Yep.
And cutting across right in front of that. So you'd put it actually on Huntington Road.
Sure.
Right before the curve and that crosswalk that crosses right there. So basically in between the plaza that's there and the used to be the Kilpack house on the corner.
Right.
So I think you'd put it before that crosswalk in that in that area, so that when they scoot across that intersection, that's the speed that they're getting ready to ramp up to do it, right? You know what I mean?
Right. So can you help me out here? Are you he's got the map up? Are you talking about?
Good point.
Yeah, good point.
Right where right in that area.
Okay.
I mean,
so yeah, that would work because it is those people, the people who are coming from Jeff's house.
you're funny.
This is my arrow.
If the speed is going this way, you want to capture it in this area while they're.
Yeah, I don't think that a lot of people are coming down Bridge Street at the corner of Cochrane and
Gunning it.
I think really it works.
Yeah. And this corner it's a natural barrier that slows the traffic down. So if they're coming down Bridge Street and taking that turn onto Cochrane Road, they have to slow down to get through here. Then they're speeding up here.
Catch it on Cochrane Road after they've come to that intersection, if they've flown through that intersection. But that's I don't know which spot's the best there, but that's what I think you should capture. That's my. first
Right,
recommendation.
that, regardless of where it's put, that area, the part that just funnels cars past Susan Wells, who I see is on the call, past her house at 55 miles an hour, that's what I most want to stop. Because that's just, if you've ever walked there, or if you live there, that's terrifying, that stretch right there between there and the cemetery.
Yeah,
So
I'd
the
like to
trans-
recognize.
trans-
that she
down
had
to
a-
25.
James,
Oh,
sorry, June, go ahead.
I'd like to, Susan had her hand up, Susan Wells. So Susan, I don't know if you're still wanting to say something, but I did.
Well, I disagree with, I agree with Jay, is that the coming off of Huntington Road is where something needs to be there. Because that's really a very scary spot between the intersection and just past our house.
Do these signs flash their speed?
They do, and
Flash the data both?
and they do blue flashing lights like on top of police
So
cars.
if you put them before that curve, so everybody slows down for that curve, it should slow them down in the intersection too, because
Right.
people crossing over that intersection.
Right, their heart will be in their mouth when they see those blue lights, so they'll slow down.
The issue is with putting it so close to the intersection, what we're trying to do is gather data of how fast people are going, how many cars are going through. If they're not going to take Cochrane Road, they're going to just take that corner, we're recording that speed as well. And so are we getting the accurate data that we want of what the speed is on Cochrane Road? So I think there are people smarter than I am that can figure out exactly where that should be placed, but that's something we should keep in mind.
Well, it's not just Cochrane Road. You didn't buy these 4 just for Cochrane Road, I hope.
No, we
Since
did not.
we bought 4 more.
You bought 4 more, so I hope you aren't just gonna put all 7 on Cochrane.
No,
Road.
that, we've got existing signs at certain points in Cochrane Road, but we don't have something to catch those people coming off Huntington Road, and that's
I want
why,
you to slow 'em down.
that's why I say that's the number one priority right there.
The traffic coming down Huntington Road, it's coming through a very rural area. Speed limit's 45, cuts to 35, cuts to
Not there,
25,
though.
and then boom, right here. Well, yeah, it's 45 up there. And then it cuts down, I think it's 35 here, and then it cuts down to
It's 25.
25.
It goes
Goes to 20.
Jeff, you
Okay.
have your hand raised, so I'll recognize you to speak, and then Lisa.
Yeah, June, I think you were right on point there with the, if we are collecting data, even if we're not collecting data, I think it's better to put it on Cochrane Road a little bit in, because I've definitely seen cars that are turning left from Bridge Street onto Cochrane Road. And I think they think that once they're on Cochrane Road, they can just let out because it's it's a straightaway and it's not in downtown anymore. And so I think a lot of them just miss the fact that it's 25 there. And so I would like to have it a little bit farther down on Cochrane Road so that it definitely catches the people from Huntington Road, but also the people turning onto it from Bridge Street.
Thank you. Jeff?
So I have 3 points. One is the transition to 25 on Huntington Road is up near the manure pit for Farr's manure pit. And frankly, that whole stretch there, it's right around there. It's right around there it's right around there. And that whole stretch is residential. And that, there may be an additional place to put a sign, but a couple of other things to think about is I think one of the reasons that the signs on Cochrane Road are not working well now is because they're solar powered to charge the batteries and they're in the trees. So that's probably gives a much less life on the batteries. I've noticed that sometimes it's on till 8:30 in the morning and then not for the rest of the day, and that might be partly the battery and partly the charging. And the third point that I'd like to make is, kind of careful what you wish for. So we're making these obnoxious, right? We're making them so they flash blue lights. Would you really want one of those in front of your house?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So, and I'd ask Sue Wells, because where we're talking is similar to where her house is, or where, Marvin Carpenter's old house was, at Gary's house, or Catherine Kilpeck's house. If you put it right in front of a bedroom window with blue flashing lights,
It's annoying.
it would, that might be kind of annoying. So, what I would suggest is maybe come up with a plan and a map, and maybe even have a public meeting about it, about where we think it should be, and notify the people on Cochrane Road, this is what we're thinking about, and get, specific, because Sue and Lisa have been terrific about giving us feedback from people who live on the road, but there might be other folks as well who might be, interested in this topic.
Absolutely. Alan,
I just want to put in, change the location, talk about East Main Street. And I would advocate starting the process for having one of these signs in the vicinity of the fire department, so that westbound traffic entering the village there has been buzzing along at 40, 45 miles an hour. The speed limit drops to 30, not 35, although you wouldn't know it from the cars. And they're halfway through the village before they get slowed down. So I think that would be a useful place for one. That's all.
thank you, Alan. Susan?
I can't really answer the question about whether I would want it in front of our house or not, because I don't know how bright the lights are, and if it's facing the intersection, it's facing away from us. But we might still see the ambient light. I don't know. I guess I have to see these things before I could say.
June, it's Bard. One other comment. If we go further up, I'm picking up on Alan's point at sort of one end of the village is down by the fire department. You go to the other end. As Route 2 comes into town on the hill further up, right at the hill coming into town. Nope. Nope. Further down. Further down. Nope. That's further up, further down.
Village.
Yeah.
Right before.
So the hill coming into town, if you blow that up a little bit, right in there. My neighbors who are on Main Street, right in there, up the hill, some of them who have little kids are saying people are coming 40 up the hill and they are arriving at the top of the hill, still going 40. And so I think the idea is, can we slow people down as they hit that hill? There's a speed sign now, but an active sign. It's like, no, we really mean it. It's not 40 or 50 anymore. It's 30.
You mean right about where the welcome to Richmond sign is?
I do.
Okay, he means where the welcome to Richmond sign is.
And slow down.
Welcome to Richmond, blue lights.
So
I'll slow down.
other comments?
I have one. There's one other place that I would kind of like to see one, but it does raise the question of, do the people who live there want flashing blue lights? But as you're coming over the Jonesville Bridge going south before you turn west, I live right there. I mean, I live on Murray Drive, and when I have to go on Cochrane Road, my brain, even though I know perfectly well what the speed limit is right there, my brain says this is a 45-mile-an-hour zone. I have to say, nope, it's not. It's a 25-mile-an-hour. And so I would put a sign basically before you hit that residential neighborhood right there, the road, from John Cohn's house down to where it goes up to 45. I would put a sign almost when you come off the bridge so that the lights aren't flashing in the residents' houses. Put one somewhere in that stretch there to basically say, FYI, you're going into a 25-mile-an-hour zone. No matter what your brain is telling you, it really is 25 miles an hour.
Yes, good idea.
Kara says that's a good idea.
Susan, do you have another comment?
I just have a question. We have 4 of these signs, and I'm hearing lots of comments about where in town they should go. So my question is, how long are they going to stay in one spot before you move them? And then once you move them, we're back to the same problem.
Right.
So I'm not sure I understand how this is going to work.
And we have brought this up before, and although they are movable, like Chief Herrick has said, like it's going to take some work to get them in place. You're not going to move them every week. I think if we're wanting to gather data, then we need to identify that time frame. Is it 6 months? Is it 9 months? Is it a year? Like we kind of need to figure that out. The interesting piece with the down by the fire department is there's going to be construction there soon. When is that happening, Josh?
Wow, yeah.
And so that kind of, that will slow things down significantly. So I think because like, we have a lot of great ideas, but I think what we need to do is come forward with a plan and bring it up so that we have people at this meeting who are concerned with particular locations and they want to come in and say, we believe this, because it's very hard for me as a select board member to know exactly where they should go and how far from the intersection and should they be before the corner or after the corner, since a corner slows people down. I think we're going to need Chief Herrick involved in this as well, and whoever else who does this kind of stuff, because I don't know that we have all the answers. We have 4 new ones. We have 3 that we need to fix so we can get data on. Our goal is to collect data. And so what we need to do is, okay, we want this to slow people down, but we also want to know what is going on and what do we need to do to change this behavior? Because the signs are giving us data. What we want to know is it going to change behavior? So
Right.
I think we have a lot of work to do before we really say, okay, this is where these signs are going to go. Jeff.
So, just to throw out one other spot that you might be familiar with, June, is coming off of Jericho Road down near Southview. That might be another location. I think, something we could do that would be useful is to put, at a future meeting, have a map with some proposed locations.
Yes.
And another person who might be helpful in this, I think it's Brian Davis, who's at the Chittenden Regional Planning Commission. He might be helpful in, knowing what the standards are for these kinds of things. And maybe, we might test it. It could be that we put them some places that don't work out well, like right in front of Sue Wells's house where, keeps her up all night. She might not like that. And we could change it, we could change at that point.
Yes. Yeah. And it is possible to do that. We just don't want to be moving them every month. And we need to do this strategically, not, I think it's a good idea to put it here. Penny.
Yes, hi, everyone. I think this is a good idea, and I'm sure you're going to come up with a great plan. I just had an idea for something maybe later, or something to think about, as I really like this concept of, like you were saying with the parking on Dugway, is to try and tell people what we want them to do, versus what we don't want them to do. And I really like the idea of this concept of self-policing. And that means, one thought I had was to possibly put a couple of signs as people enter into the sort of village area, that would say something, you are now entering, I don't know the wording, but it could be something super clever that is basically speaking to the driver, that says, we are a pedestrian friendly community that encourages recreation and walking, whatever we want it to say, something along that line, that just sort of says, oh, that's so nice. And then when people see people, when you're driving and you see someone walking, recreating, that perhaps there's a bit more of an awareness in a proactive way. Some Scandinavian towns and in Europe, they do this, and it's I think it works. And I know at Cochrane's, for example, all the stuff that goes on over there, it's incredible, the self-policing that can happen with really friendly signage. Not that I'm in favor of a lot more signs, but I do like the concept of kind of saying, you are entering into this kind of area. Please respect that end, versus don't do this, and I don't think any of you are saying that, but I think that could be one way to maybe help have it be more self-policing. Just an idea.
On that subject, We have 6 of these up now along Cochrane Road.
Oh, no, sorry. That's more positive.
Thank you.
Welcome. I mean, these are like within the last week, so hopefully that would, the idea was to kind of put a face on Share the Road. So I guess we'll see anecdotally if these help.
Yeah. Thank you, Jay, for sharing that. Maybe it needs to say, slow down, your mother may be crossing.
June,
In some cases, they'd speed up June, but
Yeah. Oh, that's not funny.
June Kara has her hand up.
Okay, Karen.
Just 2 points. One is, if you can check with the property owners before you put them, map it on a map, if the town can do that, just a quick reach out. Maybe you want to reach out via Front Porch Forum to see if anybody wants to email Josh with a recommendation where they think one should be placed, and it could be their property, and saying, hey, listen, I'm volunteering my property. I complain about speeders going all the time. Here you go. That was one thing of, before we start mapping things, I know we're throwing out ideas tonight and we're not confirming anything yet. The second thing is who has to collect the data? Is it required that the police department collect the data? Since we're down police officers, why aren't we putting this administrative task potentially on somebody else, that every Monday that Jay would volunteer, he would go download the data every Monday. If the purpose of it is to analyze the data, and it's our own town roads, we're not looking to do a data study via VTrans. Why are we not switching that from a police officer who we need to do a different level job than downloading data?
That's a very good point, Kara. And since Jay raised his hand,
no, I would
analyze it
totally
after he
do that.
collects it.
Karen, I mean, as a pedestrian who uses these roads, I would be delighted to do weekly trips to all these cameras to get the data and post it.
So the piece of that is not just the collection of data, it's making sure these systems are working. And I really would like to ask Jeff Forward to participate in looking at these batteries, looking at the solar piece to it, and really making sure we're running the most efficient systems we can. Maybe the solar panel ones get moved to a different location and the blue lights ones go where the solar panel ones are.
I think they're all solar.
Okay, so the 4 that you just got were solar too?
Yeah, because the wiring is a whole different thing.
I'm just making that, I'm gonna just put it out there. So if you could possibly, Jay, download the data, and if we take the responsibility of these off of our police officers and put it on people who have expertise in the solar area, and maybe these batteries, maybe we can replace them with a different battery that really works well. And I'm not saying that Chief, the interim chief, Ben Story doesn't have the expertise here, is I don't want to stretch him any thinner than we already are stretching him as a resource. Thank you.
Thank you, Kara. Chief Herrick, I would love to hear your response.
Thank you. I went brain dead.
So I have a few different things to respond to. The first one I'm going to respond to is somebody just used the term camera, that they're going to go download the information from the camera. I didn't hear who it was, but that word was said. And I want to be very clear about 2 things. One, they are not cameras. They do not store any information that would identify any one vehicle over any other vehicle. The reason that I'm saying that assertively is because 1, that's not lawful in Vermont. And 2, if information gets out to the public that they believe that there might be cameras in these things, there's going to be very negative, loud discussions about that. So I just want to be very clear. They are not cameras. They do not store anything other than a date, a time, and a speed.
Thank you for clarifying that.
No problem. Next, as far as someone else collecting the data, I have no issue with that. But right now it requires blocking a lane of the road and putting up a 12-foot tall ladder. So that's why the police are involved in that. Once these signs are mounted lower down to the road, if somebody else wants to go collect the data, I am happy to hand them the keys to the box and let them go collect that data. That being said, once the box is reachable from the road, it takes literally it takes 2 minutes to open up the box, pull the data box, the data tracker box out of it, plug it into the computer in my car, download the data and put it back. It's not a huge deal. You know, I can make a cup of coffee and go drive around to all the signs in one trip. That's, I have no problem handing those keys over to somebody else if somebody else wants to do it. There's nothing particularly spectacular or special or confidential about the data. The only reason the boxes are locked is so that nobody can change the settings for the speed and what the signs actually say when somebody is going by, because it's customizable. So I have no problem handing off those keys to, you know, somebody like Jay if he wants to do it, or somebody else. But until the boxes are lowered closer to the ground, it's a safety issue for having to get up there.
And Ben, do you have a sense of when that can change on the existing signs now?
Whenever somebody from the highway department has time to go make those changes.
Okay.
It's something that I'm going to ask Pete to do when he has someone available to go do it.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
All right, I don't know. Are there any other comments? We've gone a little over on this, on time-wise on this agenda item. I think we've had a great conversation. There again is work to be done. And Josh, we may need to get a small group together, which would include Chief Herrick and you and whoever else we need, and a couple of select board members. And I'd be willing to help work on this, but if others would like to step forward, then have at it. But I think we need to have a conversation and kind of put a plan in place for the select board and for the community to kind of have some input on before the select board can make a decision on where they're going to go. Any additional comments, questions? Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to discussion of requesting a no parking zone on West Main Street near the intersection with Bridge Street and Jericho Road. There've been a couple of community members, including a letter from the doctors at Richmond Family Medicine expressing concern about vehicles parked on the north side of West Main Street between the intersection with Bridge Street and Holy Rosary Church. And there is concern with people pulling out of both the church and it's the same exit for the practice, the medical practice. And so we did receive that letter. We've also had a couple of people give us feedback on how dangerous it is trying to pull out of there. So Josh, do you want to talk about this?
Sure. So I just pulled up
Your
the map.
conversation?
Yep, I'll go to that. I just pulled the map up so people can kind of see. This
Okay,
is Bridge Street, Jericho Road intersection. This here is the shared driveway with the Holy Rosary Church and Richmond Family Medicine. So that's the driveway that's being talked about mostly right now. I think it's the cars kind of parked in this area that make it hard to see down here. I think as June mentioned, in addition to the doctors from the office, I've heard from a few community members about this entrance as well. And a while back, there was actually concern about trucks turning off of Bridge Street and trying to clear parking here from some community members who are campaigning on the corner. So certainly not just, one community member or one business. I think it's come from a few. The process as far as getting this changed, again, we're in Route 2 here, not a town road. So in order to do that, the select board can make a formal request to VTrans. Sort of the more specific, the better. If there's ideas about, no parking or no parking from this many feet from an intersection, that would be helpful. VTrans also likes to see that you did a decent amount of public outreach to gather feedback from residents at large, as well as business owners and residents specifically in that area to ensure that their opinions and their use of the parking has been taken into consideration. Once that is done, we can also add a map for some more detail. Then we send it to Ian Digitis over at V-Trans. He's one of their traffic engineers who would review that. He might come back to the select board and say, I like this, but we want to change this. So he would probably work with the board to come up with an idea that he could support, and then that goes to the traffic committee from V-Trans. V-Trans would look at the recommendation from the board and from Ian if it was different, and then they would make a decision. If they decided to enforce or enact some no parking areas, then V-Trans would put up the no parking signs. And then I think we might have to change our ordinance as well to make it enforceable. But that's sort of the steps through V-Trans. The next meeting from V-Trans' traffic committee is in May. So we've got a little bit of time to put together a recommendation on this.
Thank you, Josh. Questions from the board?
Jeff.
So that sounds good. It does seem to me like we need a process for this. And it probably is not just residents, it's also merchants.
Yes.
You know, that I'd be very curious to hear about, you know, we get a lot of comments about parking in the commercial block. And that is parking that is currently available. I don't know how much it's used or how much it's needed or wanted, but I think we could ask.
June, this is Bart, just a couple of comments because I live, of course, not far from here and I walk through that area a lot. And I just observe that the challenging times are when there's heavy traffic. And so there are times of the day between traffic and pedestrians, that whole corner is kind of a cluster of activity of people going every different way. And the sight lines are challenging for many of the same reasons we've talked about. So a few people have talked to me about going from the corner past the Ski and Snowboard Express, past that apartment building, and then maybe past the medical building as well, which is not that far. It's a handful of parking spots. So I think that's what's in play. There's 2 or 3 in front of the apartment building next to Ski and Snowboard Express.
Yes.
A reminder, you can't actually park in front of Ski and Snowboard Express without being in their parking lot. Right. So it doesn't really exist there. It's really in front of the apartment building and then in front of the medical building. Mm-hmm. And if you look at it, it's maybe 3 in front of the apartment building and 3 or 4 in front of the medical building. That's what's in play. Similar to our conversation on Dugway, that leads to my process question. We have the parking committee that's been focused elsewhere and not here. And I don't know if they have any ability or interest to look at this the way they looked at Dugway.
I think they said specifically not.
And I just want to call the question because people will say, oh, the parking committee was here, but it's kind of a focused parking committee over there.
Right.
So I think it then falls to us or some of us along with maybe the chief and highway.
Thanks, Barry. Yeah, just a reminder, there was a conversation about the parking committee being renamed recreational parking because that's kind of what they're working on. And that's not what this is. I will say that, and I hadn't thought about it a lot because I don't pull out of that driveway, but it is busy at certain times of day, like when people are running in to get a coffee at Cumberland Farms and they park there. And so there's a lot of in and out. There's also kids crossing. Like it does seem to be certain times of the day that it is crazy. This was first brought to our attention because there was a big truck or trailer parked there for a while because of the construction that was going on. But since then we've had other feedback. So yeah, I think we have to figure out with people who know more than I do, can we do it? If we decide to do it, how do we do it? So we can't really make a decision tonight on this, but looking for feedback.
June, Kara has her hand up.
Yes, Kara.
A couple of things. If you're considering maybe when you review this, parking time periods and actually painted lines on the road, since they're going to redo Route 2 anyhow, you might as well come in and paint parking spaces in the areas, or a no parking where you don't want people to park, because it's a pattern that's happened forever. And so you're gonna have to break the cycle of what people are used to, and a sign isn't, just a sign isn't going to do that. That's one thing. The other thing is, through the years, the select board has created their own parking problems in the village by reducing the requirements of on-site parking for businesses, because you did away with that number of sites required. Everybody remember that? Bart's shaking his head, he does. So I want Jeff to be aware of that. I want Jay to be aware of that, that by telling businesses you didn't need to use any of your existing property for on-site parking, we're going to waive that, and you can start using all the public parking. You're creating a need for parking and not creating spaces to meet that need. So when you look at this, I really think you need it at an engineered level with V-Trans and maybe CCRPC, anybody else that's expert. You can't use your recreational parking advisory committee, who are not experts in this area and are aware of why they didn't. I mean, I was chairing it to begin with. We did not want to come to the village because you all created the issue and you need an expert to solve the issue, because we weren't going to be able to do that for you. And I think their mission even was for recreational parking. I think in their mission it said recreational parking. That aside, I really strongly lean towards you guys getting some experts' advice. And in the doctor's area, I'm not sure, when it was first proposed that they would loop around to go into the Catholic Church parking lot and come out, I thought that was going to be a one-way entrance in the doctor's parking lot and that they had to exit out. And I don't know if how clear there's a one-way sign there. And it could be very clear. So you're not worried about people parking in front of the entrance in, it's the exit out. So I think there's a possibility of leaving a couple of parking spaces placed properly, along with time limit, time period, like no parking between whatever rush hour is up until 8 o'clock in the morning or something like that. However it works for you, but I think it's going to take you doing a study, because you're doing anything with V-Trans. So you're going to have to look at doing a traffic study before you start playing around with parking there and making ordinances and things like that. That's just my gut instinct. I might know nothing. So good luck.
Kara just sparked my memory. There was a conversation with V-Trans about signing for parking when they went through West Main Street. And my memory was V-Trans said that there already shouldn't be parking in front of the apartment building because those spaces are too close to the intersection with Bridge Street. So there is a history there. This was discussed. I can't remember the specifics, but I think V-Trans said they were going to sign no parking in front of the apartment house.
There you go.
So June, Hannah has her hand up.
What's that?
Hannah has her hand up.
Oh, Hannah.
Hi, thank you. I'm one of the doctors at Richmond Family Medicine, Hannah Rabin, and we do have a one-way entrance on the east side of our building, and then the exit is through the shared parking lot driveway for the Holy Rosary Church. The issue is really as patients are leaving the clinic and trying to get back onto Route 2 from that exit, they can't really see oncoming traffic heading west from the Bridge Street intersection. And the concern that I have is if it's, just at rush hour, we have patients exiting all day long. And so we know that people park in front of our building very often. I think stopping at Cumbies or, going to the dance studio across the street. It's that concern that they're kind of blocking sight lines for traffic coming west on Route 2. So I think it's really a tragedy waiting to happen. And so my hope is that things can kind of move quickly in the direction of making some changes there. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Josh, when you talked to V-Trans, they did not say that a study was necessary, correct?
Yeah, correct. I kind of thought there might need to be a study based on what we're doing for speed feedback signs on Route 2, But the process I outlined earlier was what Ian had told me, and it was more, they want to see there was some public outreach by the select board, some thought given to this, or feedback from the residents, and then Ian, who I think is one of their traffic engineers, will review it and then take it to the to the V-Trans Traffic Committee.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Comments?
June, this
concerns?
is Bart. One last comment alluding to what Hannah referred to. And we saw this at one point, accident data for this area is probably something worth looking at, like, are people having accidents coming in and out? And that's sort of, you know, closing the barn after the horse has left, but the Agency of Transportation tends to look at things that way about
Right.
where have accidents actually occurred. So I think it's due diligence. It's something we might contemplate looking at, just where are the accidents? And
Thank you, Barb. Okay, anything else? All right, we're moving along to discussion of police governance. Let's see. So we've been talking about this for a while. And we talked at our last meeting about possibly hiring either an interim director of police services or a sort of temporary chief. Similar when we had Paco Almond, he was an interim director of police services. And Josh, what we asked for is how did it look the last time? And so we got a copy of the was it the posting, Josh, that was put out?
Yeah, I think I included the posting as well as the job description.
And I think, we'll open it for comment. I think that, you know, we have a couple of options here. We can continue doing what we're doing with Ben as the interim. We can begin a hiring process for a chief with it being very clear that we don't know that it isn't a permanent position, that it could be anything from, you know, 6 months to 2.5, 3 years, depending on what happens with the talks of a merger. Hiring an interim director of police services that could help us with the administrative duties and help if we decide that we want to move forward on a strategic planning process. And then we still have this possible conversation with Heinsberg in the future. And they're going through their strategic planning process to kind of figure out, you know, what direction they want to go in. So when we were at our last meeting, I felt like right now we as a town, we are very limited in our police services because we haven't been able to get people hired. Ben is burning the candle at both ends because he's trying to continue to do the day-to-day police work in addition to all the administrative work. And so I believe this conversation is important to happen so that we can, you know, if we really want to focus on what is it the town needs, we need to do that with strategic planning, and we can't do strategic planning with someone sort of leading the path to do that. So throwing it out there because again, we're not making a decision on this, but we do need to take a step in one of these directions.
June, just my first comment. In my head, the second and third bullet in this document are really the same bullet. I don't think there is a big difference between hiring a chief and saying it might not be long-term and hiring an interim person who's also a chief and saying it might not be long-term. It seems to me we might say, we're looking for somebody, we prefer a chief, but we'd consider an interim director.
Right. And I'm, you know, having thought about this, I'm thinking we can look for a temporary chief. And if in the hiring process, you know, in the job description, it says we prefer someone who's certified, but we will entertain applicants who are qualified without a certification. Because then we can always say, we're going to change the title because they don't have a certification. We will change the title to Director of Policing. I don't know if that's how it happened the last time. I think that the process with hiring Paco, they had a preconceived idea of what needed to happen over this short period of time, but I'm not positive. But I think you're right. I think I don't know that we want to say chief or Director of Policing. I think we want to put it out there of what we're looking for and change the title based on what the applicant pool is. Thoughts? Yes, Jeff.
So I like Bart's suggestion. I think it's either or, kind of looking for one or the other, depending on who applies. I think the ideal, would be to have a chief. That could help us do the strategic planning. But short of that, if we can't, I mean, that's kind of what Paco did. I think at the time, my recollection is that we did want a chief, but, Paco was available. He was, he had the right skills for what we needed, and frankly, he was successful. He was involved in the hiring of Chief Muldoon, which was a success. I wish Larry had stayed around longer. So I think it's either or, would be fine, to my mind, depending on who the applicants are. And so the strategic planning, the last bullet piece, that seems to me to come after we figure out the either or position. Because that should be in the job description, is that we want to be working through this strategic planning process of some sort, and we want somebody who's qualified to help us go through that.
So yes, so what you're saying is we would start the process after filling the position, not
Right.
I mean, I do think it needs to be part of the job description. It needs to be
Yes.
spelled out that we're looking for someone who can help with that.
That's part of the selection
Yeah.
process, right?
Yeah,
Somebody
that's
who
what I
is
would think.
able and willing to engage and lead them. Or
Yes.
participate in leadership of them.
Right. And we have a question in the chat. If you're in talks with Heinsberg, would the Heinsberg chief be able to help? It would be a good trial to see if the merger would even work. If it is temporary and it doesn't work with them, then you could just hire a full-time chief. And I think that I don't know what the question as far as what that help is. And we have a police governance committee that's been not governance. What's the other? Yeah, police
Yeah.
governance. In talking about the municipal district, we're waiting, because Heinsberg is doing their own strategic planning process, we're kind of waiting to see what direction they go. They are asking the question about a potential merger within their strategic planning process, but we have to make some decisions now, because we are not operating at full capacity, which means we're not giving the people of Richmond what they're paying for. And Ben has been has been overburdened with the amount of work that he has to do, because we're short-staffed and we've had staff out on medical leave. So we need to do something in order to help sort of build this department back. Any other thoughts, questions, comments?
Another chat there.
There's another chat.
Let's see. Would he be able to be a chief in Richmond too, since it doesn't seem likely you would get someone that only wants a chief for 6 months? Well, that's a good question. We had asked that came up in our conversations with Heinsberg and with VLCT, and Trevor Whipple, who is VLCT's expert in the policing area, has advised that is not the best direction to go in. Like having him having essentially two jobs, two bosses, two sets of responsibility. And so that's why we've started the conversation about the Union Municipal District. That, and because if you talk to any police officer or organization, they're all saying regionalization is the direction of the future. It's what would serve communities well, it would serve police officers well. It's just a matter of someone taking that first step, because no one has done that yet in Vermont. And so it would be a lot to take on. Other questions? And the 6-month thing, it's highly unlikely that in 6 months, when Heinsberg is done with their strategic planning, and we may just be starting if we decide to do that, that someone would be done in 6 months. Because if Heinsberg comes back and says, yes, we are absolutely interested, then we need to set up the joint survey committee who will do the work to determine, is this the right thing for Richmond and Heinsberg? And then if that is determined, yes, that is what we're going to do. There's another potential year or two to get that to happen. So we are looking at a years long process.
Other chat.
Question?
There's another chat.
Oh. It would only be a temporary situation in the meantime, and it would be good to see if Richmond and Heinsberg worked as a municipality. Yes, and we've been meeting with them, but we're not there. Like, it hasn't happened. Could we do contract services? Potentially, but we haven't. That's something that we haven't explored, and so we could look at that.
June, I'll just observe based on our conversations with the Heinsberg folks, my opinion, none of that is fast. So Warren, there's nothing in any of this that feels like 6 months to me. There's a lot that feels like 18 to 36 months, frankly. Yeah.
Yes.
Much longer. And that municipality thing, there is no such thing as a Richmond Heinsberg municipality. I'll remind folks that there are people in this county who've been working on regional dispatch for over 30 years and have not yet fully executed that. And most of that is about governance, control, power, and funding. What else could it be?
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
can't agree on the fight song.
Thank you, Bart. So let's talk about what we think is the right thing for Richmond right now. Fill this interim period we're in.
June, Kara has her hand up.
Oh, yes, Kara.
I just want to make sure I'm clearly understanding the goals, because that helps you draft whatever you're going to draft. So goal number 1 is to allow Chief Herrick to stop doing the chief duty and go back to being a full-time officer. So you win back an officer. Correct? That's one of the goals.
But he would also be able to apply for the position.
Correct, but I mean, right now you've got him doing 2 jobs. The goal is to let him do 1 job, and I don't mean to assume which way he wanted to go, but in public he said he wants to go back to being an officer. Whether he's changed his mind, he's allowed to do that. I'm not judging that.
Yes.
But goal 1 was to let him be an officer if that's what chooses to happen. The other part was to take on the administrative duty. Now, you said they might not need to be certified. Certified is, they only need to be, want to understand, they only need to be certified if they're going to go out in the field and work as an officer.
If they're gonna, yes, patrol.
But that's not one of your goals, is to have, you're not looking for the chief to patrol. You would rather have the chief do administrative duty strategic planning and allow an officer to be an officer?
I think there's a lot in there. And
What's
this
your
is me
primary?
speaking from previous experience, and it could be very different now. And so Chief Herrick, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think our chief has always done patrolling and administrative.
But never done a strategic plan.
No, I don't know if that
Not in the
has
last
ever
20
happened.
years.
What hasn't,
But one of the things we've
happened
talked
is-
about, if I could jump in, June, is we've talked about contracting with support to do the strategic plan.
Gotcha.
So it's not like, oh, you have to be a strategic planning expert. You
right,
have to be able and willing to participate in strategic planning with contractual strategic planner support.
Gotcha. I'm just.
Does that make sense?
I'm just trying to wrap my mind around this. So my thought process was you were looking for somebody who possibly had expertise in strategic planning to aid you in this department's strategic plan moving forward, whether it's merging, whether it's doing the regional situation or strictly what it looks for, like in this small town that we have. But, okay, I'm just trying to understand what you're looking for, because if I'm confused and I go to your meetings, I can imagine everybody else is confused.
I think what we're looking
sounds
for
like-
is to
It sounds like you guys are still trying to decide too.
right. And I think what we're looking for is to make sure that we have a police department that's serving the town of Richmond. And right now, we're not fully staffed, and Ben is working so hard at what absolutely has to be done that, has there been an opportunity to kind of go out and recruit? Probably not. Like it's really hard to try to get all of it done. So what we need is another person, if not two more, in Richmond. And then, again, me speaking on, not on the part of the board, but we've had a lot of conversations around this. What is it we want? And without having a strategic planning process, how do we know what it is the town needs and wants? Being a strategic planner and someone who has done this over and over, it's really hard to put a plan in place that you're going to bring somebody else in to put into play. Like you want buy-in on a plan from the people who are going to be responsible for that plan. Now,
I don't
is that
disagree, but the
someone who's
person might not
temporary?
know our
Maybe
system.
not. But when we get down the road, if there is an merger, we want a chief in place in Richmond. Well, we kind of need to determine that. So, but I think if we're not going to do a merger, which I think is something we really do want to do, but we're not the only ones here having this conversation. We need Heinsberg at the table as well. So I feel like without putting something out there and bringing another person into the department, and it may be that that it's another patrol person and we hire, someone from the department. I don't know. Without doing a hiring process, we don't know who that will be. But
So
we need
June,
to build our staff.
So one other comment, because there's some text like, what can we expect? In my opinion, strategic planning is not what we can expect, but what we want.
Yeah.
So what does the town want for
Right.
police services? And in my opinion, some things I've heard. What do we want for shift coverage? Like, when do we want police officers on duty?
Right.
What shifts, what days of the week, how many? And that's a pretty basic. Somebody mentioned early on, hey, if we join with another town, we could have a SWAT team. I'm just gonna say,
God.
there's nothing on the planet that leads me to conclude that Richmond is ever gonna be part of a SWAT team.
Good.
Another example is, oh, do we want a detective? This takes me back to some of the discussions years ago about a police building. I think we're personally a ways away from having a detective, but that is a conversation to have. Do we want a detective to investigate crimes in Richmond, or is that state police or somebody else where it doesn't happen? So I think those are the kinds of questions we want. There's another one. What do you want governance to look like? My experience to date suggests that most people do not know what the state statute says about police department governance, that we don't have just a free hand about everything. But that's the kind of thing. What does governance supervision look like? Reminder that right now the town manager supervises the police chief, not the select board. So there's some level setting as well as what then do we want for police services? If we thought about it, like, what do you want from a restaurant? You know, like what kind of food, how many hours open? It's not entirely dissimilar from that. And then what services we want. We've talked about some of this with Heinsberg, like, hey, here's one. We want parking enforcement on places like Dugway. And that's not always popular in other towns, but that is an issue for residents of our town. And speed enforcement on Cochrane Road. I mean, you start to put together a list of things that people want. Another example was if somebody breaks into my garage or my car or my house and steals stuff, I want to call and somebody will show up in a reasonable period of time versus fill out a form online. And if we find anything, we'll get back to you.
Right.
So those are the kinds of conversations that I think we might have about what do you want from police services.
Thank you, Barton. And Ian made a good comment in the chat that, you know, it not just what do we want, but what do we expect from our police department. So I think we don't, right now, we can't expect a lot when we are down 2 full-time officers and we have an interim that's I know the question was, well, our interim chief is doing the same duties as any chief. That would be true if we were fully staffed, but we're not fully staffed. So there's a lot of extra stuff being done. What I think what we want to talk about as a board is how do we help get to the next level? How do we get someone in who can help us kind of figure out, now that Heinsberg is taking some time to kind of figure out exactly what they want, or stepping back from the conversation of a merger, what is it we want from, you know, how can we help our police department to figure out what we want and expect from our police department? Jeff.
So I think what we need to do tonight is give Josh some direction. I think what Josh was asking for was some direction for what we would hope that he would do. You know, and you know, put on his to-do list. And I think that what I'm hearing is we're looking at drafting a what would you call it? A solicitation
Recruitment plan,
you know, for you know, a hire, you know, and that hiring would, I think that's the first step. And that would look like a job description, would look like that it could be a certified chief or somebody working towards that, has certification for providing police services. It could be an administrative position, and then we could see what the pool of applicants are. I think, is that what you were looking for, Josh? You had several bullets there. It seems like those 2 bullets could be merged together and answer your question.
Yeah, essentially, I'm looking for like, kind of where does the select board want to go? I think there's a number of ideas kind of on the table, and what do we want to do? And as I listen to the conversation, I think I want to kind of go back to what Bart had said in the beginning about bullet 2 and 3 are sort of similar, where we put out an interim or we ask for a full time. And I think I separated a little bit because I think the only way that this would really be interim is if Heinsberg comes back from their study in 6 months and says, yeah, we really want to do a union municipal district. We want to explore that. Then we take the 2 or 3 years to explore that. And then at that point, if we go forward with that, okay, there might not be a chief in Richmond and one in Heinsberg anymore. There'd be one for the union municipal district. So I don't know if there's a scenario really where in a year we say, without a merger, oh, we're not going to have a police department, we're not going to have a chief anymore. So that's why I kind of put the idea of maybe we just hire a full-time chief with full disclosure that, yeah, in 6 to 8 months, we could be considering Union Municipal District, but even if we do, that's 2 to 3 years away before that would come to fruition. So I just wanted to put that out there as I'm sort of trying to formulate that thought as this conversation goes on. And that's kind of, I just wanted to add that to the discussion.
Thank you, Josh. Penny?
Unmute. Great discussion. Awesome. As a person who lives in town and sees lots of activity and generally feels very good about our community, I do think there is, I don't know if I would say need, but I think our town is big enough that a police presence in some form like you're exploring is important. What I think is really important, regardless of what happens in the future, is for the people of the town to know what we have now. What kind of service do we have now? What are we supposed to do? What I find interesting is, the police department I know is limited, and I know people do a great job, but I think it feels very inaccessible to the public. I live across the street. I've gone over there several times. You just cannot access the police people. There's no office hours. I understand why, but at the same time, where's the information? Where do we learn about what's going on in our town in terms of break-ins down at the Park and Ride, or good things that are happening that the police have taken care of with regards to parking or whatever. I just think that, we are paying for something, and I'm not sure what we have as a town person. I don't know what we have. And I think ultimately we want the people in the community to feel safe and cared for and looked after, whether that, whatever form that takes may be, it doesn't matter, but we should know what it is, even at the time, even if it's not as good as we want, or maybe it's too much. I think people should know what exists. And so I just want to put that word out there.
Thank you, Penny.
Thank you all for doing such a great job.
June,
So
I have
I-
my hand up.
Who?
Kara.
Kara has her hand
Kara.
up. So just like I brought a different perspective to say maybe somebody else could collect the sign data, here's a different perspective after listening to what Bard had to say. What if you lean toward a chief who was certified or in the act of being certified, and also look to hire or increase administrative support in that department? Because I think you have part-time administrative support is my understanding. So you could have somebody at the police department administratively full-time who could be the face to the public, who could be helpful, who could help direct them, but also take on some of the administrative duties of the chief, or take on some of those reporting out to the public. You could have somebody filling a role, and because you can't get police officers right now. You've tried to hire police officers. So maybe if you can take off any administrative duties and put them on an administrative level person, it would free up time for both a chief, if it's certified, to act as an officer, and officers to do what they need to do that isn't putting out a report to the public, or putting out that kind of informational piece, or reporting to the select board, or all of those things. Just tossing it out there that it sounds like if you need more administrative support, and that's the type of people that you can hire, why are we not hiring those people and allowing the officers to do the duty that requires the certification? Just an idea.
Thank you, Kara. That you bring up a very good point. And I don't know, we have had the conversation about increasing the administrative support for the police department. And so that is still being discussed. I think, if the administrative person wasn't full-time, they were 3/4 time when Chief Miller was in Richmond, and that main door was always open. Like, you could always get to the admin person. And I think that's what Penny's point is, like, we're missing that sort of personal connection. Like, even, you can knock on the door, but you don't know if anyone's in there. And so I think that, absolutely, Kara, that's something we should be looking
And
at.
I don't know if that administrative person, because I know I've heard people talking to me about issues of not being able to get a copy of a accident report because they don't have access to the police department, and because this police department is so short-staffed. But if they were somebody who was involved, who needs the report for an insurance situation, and the accident happened 6 weeks ago, you've got some issues there administratively that I would think that an administrative person could release a copy. Somebody has to identify themselves and that kind of thing, safeguards in place. But I think you need somebody who can do some of that administrative stuff that the officers, you can't ever catch the officer, you've got a whole bunch of issues going on. I think that would solve some problems.
Thank you, Kara. You make a very good point. So Josh is looking for a recommendation, and I think Josh, what you said about, putting it out there that we're looking for a chief, a full-time chief, and these are the qualifications we're looking for. Certification is preferred, and that way, depending on what we get, we kind of figure out then what the title is. But so I'm going to throw it out there so Josh has a direction to move in. What are people's thoughts?
Language like the ideal candidate would have this.
Yes.
And whatever that is, it might be harder than we think to find a certified chief. Period.
It might be, but we won't know unless we do it.
But you're right. And so and leaving the door open for something else
Yes.
might give us more applicants to choose from.
Yes. And I think it would look very different, the job description than what we put out when Paco was hired. So Josh, if you want me to work with you on drafting something for our next meeting, I'd be happy to do that.
Oh, that would be great.
And are you guys just posting Vermont? Is there, because one of the things we found where I used to work was that we were possibly posting not in all of the right areas.
Mhm.
If we were looking for diversity and inclusion and all of those kinds of things, stop going to your colleges and go get, people who have lifetime experience. And I don't mean a police officer, but I'm just using that as an example, that we had to learn to go to other posting areas to post to potentially get somebody from a different state, somebody who wants to relocate and is coming from a small town somewhere else and can come to a small town here. I know we like to have retired state troopers. Historically, we've done that, but I'm not sure what their availability is. So I'm just saying, are we trying to think outside the box when it comes to where we're advertising?
We did that for our last search. We had candidates from all over the country.
Beautiful.
Big net.
Yeah.
That's good for the public to really remember.
Okay, then.
Okay.
Anything else?
Nope.
Okay, moving along. Summary of response to the winter storm. So Josh, first of all, it was a wild one, and we had a few phone calls over that weekend. So Josh, I'll let you fill everybody in.
Sure. Thanks, June. So yeah, the winter storm we're referencing is the one that hit on Friday, December 23rd, the day before Christmas Eve. And I guess I'll sort of give a summary of sort of what happened and then talk about some steps we can take to try to do a better response. So the state of Vermont, I think it was on Thursday, started to call some emergency management meetings that we started to go to. One of their big stresses was setting up warming shelters, knowing that there was going to be high winds and there was going to be potential power outages and cold weather coming in on the backside of the storm. So after that meeting, started looking into our emergency management plan, which talks about the schools as our shelters. Was doing a lot of calling around to figure out, okay, what do we have in place? Understand that the school they do not have a generator to run heat.
Oh, I lost you.
We lost you. We lost you, Josh.
Audio, Josh.
Josh, we can't hear you.
Hey, Josh.
Josh, we can't hear you.
We lost your audio.
Point to your ear.
I think my thing came out. Where did I leave off?
About 60 seconds at the beginning.
No,
At the beginning?
no,
Oh, God.
not really. You started talking about the calls.
Okay,
You
yeah,
started
right. So
talking
after
about
the
calls, and then you
meeting
faded
call,
out.
yeah, I'm sorry. My wire came loose from my phone where I'm connected, so I will leave my hands out of there. So after the meeting, started to try to call around to figure out what was available at the school. They don't have a generator to run heat. They just have a generator to run like their fridge in the kitchen. So we knew that really wasn't going to work. We started to talk to Highway and to Fire. They do have generators to keep their buildings warm. So we knew that we had those two buildings as a fallback. By the time we got to Friday afternoon, there was another emergency management meeting. They were talking about setting up a statewide warming shelter for overnight purposes, at least one or two in the area. And when I was calling some of the state folks, they said, look, for overnight shelters, we'll usually handle that. We don't expect the towns to do overnight in this situation. What we're really looking for is, can you guys do something during the day for residents? So Friday at about noon, we had power here in the town center, and we made the decision to open the town center for residents for day warming until 4 o'clock on Friday, and then again on Saturday from 8 to 4. The idea to go here rather than at the fire station or Highway was Fire and Highway were both busy responding to the storm, so we didn't really want to get in their way if we had a large turnout. We were fortunate that we had power here in the town center. The result of that was we had about 4 people that came on Friday afternoon to use the town center for a warming station. So it wasn't an overwhelming response, even though we had quite a few, several hundred houses without power, probably through Monday even. I think that what we can do as far as a backup, next steps is we really need to look into what is at the school. I've heard that they might have hookups for a generator, and I kind of heard that the plan would be that Red Cross or National Guard would bring in a generator and bring in cots and blankets and whatnot if we need to do something overnight. However, I think what we learned through this is that turnaround time is sort of fairly slow in a situation like this. They were able to get one overnight shelter opened in Barry, which is not exactly local to Richmond. So I think that the conversation kind of needs to turn to, if we want to be prepared even for day use, we need to have a generator on site or know how to source one very quickly in an emergency, make sure there's hookups at the school so that we can hook it up, run the heater. And if we wanted to be prepared for overnight, very quickly without assistance, we need to look into purchasing cots, purchasing blankets. There's a whole checklist of things that the Red Cross would have for us to make sure that we have on hand. Or again, how to source those quickly if we need to. And if we're going to buy any of this, it's making sure that we also maintain it and make sure that it's, clean and efficient bedding and the generator's ready to run.
Yeah, what about those Tesla walls?
I've got 2. They last for about a day.
June, you're muted. Were you calling somebody?
Yes, I was. Sorry. I was coughing. So, Jeff, I'm calling on you.
Okay, so I'm quite certain that they have a hookup for a generator. I was involved, I was on the board at the time that we did transformer replacements in all 3 schools. And we discussed whether or not to buy a generator at that time to have on site. And we decided as a school district not to because of the routine maintenance that it must have. And they didn't want the staffing to do that or the expense to do that. They need to be energized like once a week. And so like just buying a generator and putting it at the school doesn't really solve that problem of, who maintains it, who makes sure that it's working correctly, where's the fuel come from, all of that stuff. You'd have to have a conversation with the school district. I do think that it would be worthwhile to talk to, who is it, public safety, I imagine, is that runs emergency, has the emergency response center, about what they would recommend for places in this region. You shouldn't necessarily be thinking about it just for Richmond. We should be thinking about it for the region, including Huntington, Bolton, maybe Williston, who knows? But, this is another area where, I think we would be wise to think regionally rather than just parochially, just for our town, so that we don't have one in this town, one in that town, one in every town.
June, just a comment, I'm sorry, did you have your hand up?
I did.
Jay, go ahead, then I'll.
Well, I had a couple of questions. One, has CCRPC ever looked into coming up with a regional plan for this kind of thing?
There's a whole process for regional emergency planning. I can't tell you what it is.
Okay, and second question, because I am a little dismayed to hear it, the state will do it, but you've got to hold your breath. That's not a good answer when you're without power and it dips into the negative, below zero temperatures, and you've got a promise, well, you can go to Barry, especially if you have small children, you need to power your emergency medical equipment. This sounds like another case where the state simply is kind of leaving us to our own devices. And so my other question is, I moved to Vermont in the spring of 1998, so I missed the ice storm. What did Richmond do in the winter of 98 when power was gone for like 2 weeks?
I was in South Burlington without power, so I don't know.
But I mean, when you're talking 2 weeks, obviously you've got to have something. And if everybody's out of power, the state probably is not gonna be able to come along and help us. So I'm not entirely satisfied with the idea of, well, we don't want to have one for 10. I can't speak for Williston. I can't speak for St. George, but I can speak for Richmond. I'd like to make sure that if we have something at that scale, we are prepared. I know there would be maintenance. Somebody's got to go over and turn the thing on once a week. I know all too well how that happens too. In 1999, my employer had a Y2K plan to support our customers. We're a software company, and we had remediated all the Y2K issues with our software, but our customers were also using third-party software that interfaced with ours. So we had to be open 24 hours during that stretch, just in case there was a problem. And since we didn't know if the power was going to go out, for all we knew, the whole world was going to shut down. We had a generator. That was our brilliant idea. We had our generator out back of the building. It would last for days. So guess what? They fired it up at 3 p.m. on New Year's Eve just to make sure it worked. It blew up, and that was that for that plan.
Exactly.
You've got to take care of your stuff, and I realize there's a cost involved with that, but if I can't trust somebody else to do it, I feel like we've got to do it ourselves.
So I have a follow-up comment. I've been to 3 last mile houses in rural Maine that all had generators with, covered with a weatherproof cover, sitting on a concrete pad next to a propane tank. One of them is, I don't know, 3,000 gallons. It was huge.
Mm-hmm.
The way I noticed them is when they turn themselves on as part of their regularly scheduled self-maintenance, because it's 2023, not 2000. They actually turn themselves on. If there's a problem, they call for maintenance.
Let's get those.
So where I'm going is the technology has really emerged in terms of like generators and installation and stability, and it's not without maintenance, but it's not like you got to send the guy over to turn it on anymore. They actually, and because they're propane, they're clean, and it's a different set of maintenance than like if it were diesel or gasoline.
Do you have any idea what the price? I mean, I'm guessing $10,000 for a start for something that can power the school.
I don't know. These are homeowners who didn't have huge money, but they put them in because otherwise you'd have no power for potentially weeks on the end of a dirt road in Maine. So
for a home that's probably like 2,500 square feet, it's probably 10,000. But it's security.
That's a whole different thing.
And so, and I think one of the things like I had mentioned to Josh is we are having, I mean, the climate fluctuations are more and more common. And so it's not just about heat. We need a cooling station too. Like, we have to look at the whole picture, because there are times when, you know, many people in Vermont, including me, do not have air conditioning. And we're getting a lot more 90-degree days, and we're going to get even more and into the hundreds. So we really do need to look at what we're going to do in the event of a weather situation either way. Aaron.
What about partnering with the National Guard or Red Cross? I mean, we have the generator hookup, so I'm a layman, but it seems we could.
That was the idea. That was the idea when we set it up, is that in a true emergency, a multi-day emergency, we're not the only ones that are trying to figure this out. The state is trying to figure it out. And and deploying equipment where it could easily go. We should connect those dots to make sure they know what we have.
Yeah.
It's a good facility for it's got full commercial kitchen, enough for 500, that was originally designed for.
Water and sewer.
It's got water and sewer. And it was set up, my understanding, is when we did that whole, we rewired the inside of the whole building. And my understanding was that hookup was for the boiler, and for emergency services, like, pumps for the sewage, because I think and water, I think we needed to do that at the time because of the pressure. And kitchen. So, like, we are a good step along the way. We don't need to do that at Richmond Elementary. It's right next door, right? And so, like, we're better off at Camel's Hump. If it's on their property and it's something they own, they need to maintain it. And it's really complicated for us to maintain equipment on their property when we do not have any kind of facilities person at all. So it's a bigger conversation, and I think both RCPC would be a good place to start, and maybe public safety at the state level. And this is a good time to bring it up, because we just experienced this big storm. There's another one going on out west right now.
And keep in mind, if it's a statewide event, the National Guard is responding statewide. So you may be waiting days if you're waiting on the National Guard to bring you a generator. So is concerning, because they are responding to the whole state. Aaron, you have your hand up, and thank you. You made a very good comment in the chat. So
what was the comment?
I guess that's what I was going to revisit. Was it seems like this conversation marries well with the conversation about what to do with ARPA money. It does seem like that might be a committee to involve in this conversation as well. And it also sounds like, I don't know how big of a generator they would need, but there might be the opportunity to have a generator that's used in other things in the town. Like, I don't know, maybe the road crew would use it or whatever, but that it is somewhere and locatable, that it could be brought to Camel's Hump if needed. I don't know if that would be a good size requirement, but that maybe it's used for other things in the town, but it's earmarked for that purpose if needed for a warming shelter. And I do think you made a good point that I was going to say about the National Guard. It could take a while for them to get here, and Barry is too far. Like, we were milking cows on Friday night in Starksboro when that storm happened, and it took us almost an hour to get there and almost an hour to get back. And people should not have been driving to go to a warming shelter that night. Like, if they did need to drive, it would need to be more local than all the way to Barry. Like, that was very unsafe conditions. So that's something to think about too.
thank you, Aaron.
Yeah.
Jay.
So, I would support using town money, whether it be ARPA money or regularly budgeted money, to buy a generator. Whether all the other planning needs to take place as well. But when it comes to things like cots A lot of us have sleeping bags. Push come to shove, we can put those down. We've got a lot of stuff where we could say everybody who has a propane stove, bring it to the school. But the one thing we can't do any of that without is a generator. And I would really like to see us explore what it would cost to get one of the kind that Bard talks about that can maintain itself. So we have a little bit more information. Right now, speculatively, we're thinking like $30,000 for one of those, but is that with all the features we need? I don't know. I just don't like the idea of facing a town and having to say, well, we know you're without power for 7 days and your baby developed a terrible cough because they were freezing cold and your cat's all, blah, 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 blah. I just don't like to say to somebody who's just had everything go wrong for them because we had no power that, well, we're thinking about it. We'll have something maybe next year. This is something I'd like to see put pretty far forward on the burner. I don't want to jump, I don't want to act capriciously and just buy things for the sake of buying things, but I don't like the idea of putting it off too long either.
And I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. I think if we reach out to emergency management, we can get some
Right.
pretty good advice on how to do what it is we're looking to do.
Yeah, I think, and then if they give us advice and say, well, here's the model generator we recommend, and yes, your town is of a size that could probably use one, then I'm like, okay, let's act on that. Let's not say, well, wait till the next budgetary cycle.
Anthony makes a good point that, if we had so-called community policing, people, a department that knew the people who lived in town and the people in town knew the department better, we could have a list of people who had medical needs where the police and fire could check on them in times of emergency. I think our services, both fire, rescue and police could be another piece of that puzzle with existing staff.
I'm just going to respond to that. I've been part of at least 15 conversations about these lists. And they typically implode because they need to be maintained in real time. So here's my example. Somebody had a hip replacement yesterday. Are they on the list? For how long? That's the reality of medical care in the United States, like that stuff. So what it's tended to fall to is a self-declared list. If I recall correctly, Barry did this, and it was like self-managed. The Area Agency on Aging did some of this, but they are notoriously hard to manage and outdated. Like people who die of their medical condition don't frequently call you to tell you. So now you have a list of people with like somebody who died.
Yeah, right.
And then that becomes daunting. You're going to find somebody who's not there. So I'm not going to entirely rain on the parade, but like the idea starts to get more challenging in terms of detail.
At the same time, the police departments do wellness checks. Like if a family member says, hey, I'm wondering if you could check because, my parents have been without power. Like they do that when they're called, but I agree with Bard, like trying to maintain a list would be like, who's going to do it?
Yeah, who's going to do it?
Kara has her hand up, June.
Yes, Kara.
So a couple of things. You've got what you're talking about, Jeff, when you talk fire, rescue, highway, you're talking about an emergency plan. And years ago, an emergency plan was already created. The shelter was established as Camel's Hump, which is regional, just to remind you, it's not just Richmond, Bolton, Huntington. They send their children there, so it's regional. And to address whether we need cots, just to let you know, Jay, we really should be prepared. It wasn't the plan that we were supposed to get some because elderly people can't get up and down on
You're
the
absolutely
floor.
right.
So I totally support what Bart said. You can't do a list. That's unrealistic. What you've said is we need to invest now and not wait for the next emergency. If we have ARPA money and the ARPA committee doesn't even have to recommend it. The select board has the full power of the ARPA money down the road if you don't find the money somewhere else. The generator thing though, when Jeff was saying we aren't at the school, we don't all this, you can go, the town can enter into a lease agreement with the school that allows us to have a generator there hooked up, ready to go with the propane, the system that Bar says, and that we have a contractor that goes in and maintains it and services it, and it's an automatically kicked on generator. You have the ability to go into an agreement with the school like that, and I would think the school would want, since they're already declared the emergency shelter for this region, it's, you don't get to say, yeah, but.
Yeah.
We can
And-
definitely enter an agreement. We pay for a service contract to make sure it's maintained annually. We have it have to be one of those automated ones that automatically kicks in and checks itself and all that kind of stuff. This is, I totally support this. I think it's a good investment for this community, since I've had to help elderly people in this community relocate during the time that they were out without power for multiple days.
Yeah, there's a lot that would go into this besides the generator, and you're right. There are questions like, if the school's without power, I mean, they're located across the hill from the tank, but does water continue to flow if there's no power? Would we need to have, pallets and pallets of jugs of water, that kind of
It's
thing?
gravity fed though.
I know, but does the school inside?
If you have a
Somebody can
generator,
get water
you'll
up there.
have water.
Right.
And so you can do that by a generator from the wellhead. So yeah, it's a good thing to think about, because
Right.
eventually, the tank runs out if you don't keep refilling it.
Right.
So
So I'd like the whole plan looked at, Jay.
Yeah, absolutely. That's my point. And
Just
there's a
adopted-
million little things. There's
just
water,
adopted
there's
like
power, there's
a month ago.
how long do the Band-Aids and how long do the antiseptics, there's
But
all that.
The whole plan looked at, and the appropriate funding to not just have a piece of paper plan and not have anything to back it up. If you don't have an emergency shelter that doesn't have backup power, then you don't have an emergency shelter.
No, that's why I said the
Right.
generator is the key thing, but we should look at all this, because you don't want to find out that, you go on a picnic and everybody brought canned food, but nobody brought the can opener.
Well, and
You
who
know?
has the keys to the school? So if nobody from the town doesn't have any set of keys or codes to get into the school to open an emergency shelter, and nobody can reach the principal because the principal doesn't, I'm just giving an example. I'm not saying this is the
No, we'll
fact.
just call Rod up
But
and say,
doesn't
let us in.
But doesn't live in the area and can't travel back to unlock the emergency shelter. You've got some issues that you've got to work out in your
Right,
plan.
and I think we should do those sooner rather than later.
Well, and
So-
we have a plan, and I think the issues came up last summer too, when we had the heat emergency. And I think now we just, because it says in the plan that Camel's Hump is our emergency shelter. Now we need to make sure it is our emergency shelter. So we're reminded of this every time we have an issue. So now it's time to put it on the agenda to address it.
Right, we need to go through the plan and check off, okay, it says this. Is
Yes.
that true in reality? It says this, is that true in reality?
Because this building has stairs. So if you
It
didn't
says
have
24,
power
but it
here,
just went
and you're working off a generator, how
months ago.
strong is the elevator?
Right.
and it's led by Josh.
Okay, so we, again, have work to do on this, but our response, I think, was very good. Josh and I were on the phone multiple times a day, and emergency management was following up saying, what is it you need? Like, let us know what you're offering. We'll put it out there. There was, and it was pre-planned, like, we're gonna have a meeting on Thursday at 11, we're gonna meeting on Friday at 11, we're gonna have a meeting on Saturday at 11. So I think that all things considered, it went fairly well. We didn't have any major issues. We weren't without power for a long, some people were out without power for days, but fortunately the town center came on very quickly and we were able to get people in there. But
People didn't
yes,
know.
there are gaps that we need to address.
People didn't know because this isn't the emergency shelter and they didn't have power to know. So I'm just giving you a heads up. You got to educate the public ahead of time.
And we gotta make sure that we can cover the checks we promise that we write. If we're gonna tell
Yes.
people at the shelter, we have to have a shelter.
Yes, and that's a good point. I don't know that people even know that the school is the emergency shelter. Like,
Oh, yeah.
do we
A lot more
communicate?
knew- a lot more knew it was the emergency shelter than the town center.
Right, I was actually present at, I went through the market and people were saying the school's a shelter, they'll open it when night comes. I'm like, I don't think so.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of misinformation going around on that Friday.
Aaron,
I also think something to consider is that the school is in one of the areas that generally has power. So if the school didn't have power and we needed the generator, a very large portion of the populace of Richmond would be without power. Like if we had to resort to using the school, the generator at the school, that means a lot of people, you know, like it would be a large volume of people looking for shelter.
Yeah.
Yeah, and conversely, you know, that the school is likely to have power when, you know, a bunch of people don't. You know, so, you know, it's, we're talking about rare circumstances, you know. And, you know, my recollection is what, 2 months ago, we adopted a revision to our emergency management plan. Something like that. I remember voting on it.
Yes.
Because I remember correcting, you know, like the principal's name needed to be changed, for
Well,
example.
we review it annually.
We review
right,
it
Josh?
annually. So it's not like we don't, you know, we don't think about this periodically. You know, and if we want to have a focused discussion on it, you know, again, this might be a really good thing to have the Regional Planning Commission help walk us through this. What are the services that are available in the region? You know, what should be the designated places? If the National Guard has a limited number of generators to deploy, would this be one of the locations or not? You know, is there some, or the Williston Armory, you know, might be another location. And that's, you know, that's not awful. That's a lot closer than Barry. So, you know.
Yeah, but we have the ability to serve our community.
And, you know, I question whether we should spend, you know, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 trying, plus a routine maintenance task to, you know, if that's an appropriate use of money for us to do that for something that we might use, you know, once a decade, and it might not be ready because we haven't maintained it. We have a hard time maintaining the stuff.
So I'd like us to look at solar, the walls that take the solar energy and convert it and put it into a Tesla battery backup wall. If that will work on a larger scale, that could be.
Tesla does have
Will work.
I do have 2 Tesla power walls at my house. It's 2 because that's to hold my solar. They need to be 2. If I turned off everything at my house that day, and I did this as an exercise, I turned off everything except for my freezer, my refrigerator. Everything else was off, literally everything. My house was drawing 0.2 kilowatts or something at that point. At that point, my household battery would last 24 hours.
Well, the question was.
That's with everything conceivable shut down.
Right, but the question is, can the solar keep the size of the solar?
If there's no snow on the panels, yeah. At one point, the sun came out well enough that Friday that I actually did start producing more than I was consuming. So if you're prepared to go up there with a broom and sweep off the solar panels, it'll work a lot better. But my 2 little household power walls is one thing. The big industrial size one the Tesla Corporation makes for
It's not likely.
yeah, I don't think we're gonna afford one, but they make those for things like airports, like the control towers. But I do think it's money. They're not gonna be as big of a maintenance concern as they once would have been. We have to go out there once we can clear it out. And to June's point, this is not 1975. We are in a position where we could have a heat emergency every year. We're in a position where we could have, I mean, bad storms happening. We're having 100-year storms happening every 10 years now. So I think we need to be more prepared than you're giving us credit for.
Well, so like a heated, you know, if you want to use the example of a heat emergency, the school doesn't work. The school doesn't have air conditioning. And that's, you know, it's a good thing to think about. Does the school need air conditioning? That's like probably maybe $3 million. And should they do that because we might have an emergency every now and then? I doubt that they would put that much money into it.
No, I don't think they would.
You know, and they haven't. The school wasn't built for that. We should, when we think of this building, we should make sure that it is insulated well for both heat and cold, and that it will hold the temperature one way or the other. It should be adequate. There should be adequate heating and ventilating equipment and air conditioning equipment to sustain this building, which would be a good step in the right direction because we're going to be doing it anyways. But you know, I think it's a larger discussion, and maybe we can do that sometime over in the future here of exactly how much do we want to invest in preparedness. And whether and it should be a larger community discussion that put some dollar values on that, and not just buy equipment because we think it's going to make us feel better. Because I don't think a generator solves our problem. no matter what the size is and no matter how much it costs. I don't think it solves the problem.
That's true.
Thank you, Jeff.
But it could be a
With that,
piecemeal solution.
You can say that about
That
anything.
sums up our storm response. So unless there's other comments that are storm response related.
Just
Okay,
a question about all the trees that were down on all the roads and stuff like that. And I'm just curious to know, like the trees that are down that the highway or even some citizens went on town roads and just cut right at the edge of the actual travel portion of the road, and the whole tree is still in the ditch and all of that. And is the highway department going to clean that up? Are we going to contact that donate the firewood thing? Are they going to come get the wood? Are you going to open up to citizens to go cut the logs out of the ditches? What is the plan for the cleanup of those trees, since we don't have snow on the ground right now?
Josh?
Yeah, I'll have to follow with Pete on that. He was out actually most of this, which week was it? Most of last week into this week, I think, with COVID. So I'll have to follow with him on the plan to remove those trees. I was thinking about this morning too, though, Kara, as I was out for my run, looking at trees in the ditch, wondering we got to get them out of there, especially some of the brand new stone line ditching we did on East Hill Road.
And so
Yeah, there's a
residents,
lot
can
of-
let you know, Josh, if they have a tree down near their home?
I'm sorry?
So residents can let you know if they have a tree down near their home on the road?
Sure, and I'll talk to Pete. I mean, I know he knows they're out there because they cut most of them. So I'll follow up with Pete to find out what the plan is to get them out of there so the ditches work correctly come spring.
Okay.
Well, and I'm not sure what it is when the trees are in the right of way and then fall toward the property owner's property, if the town, because it was in the right of way.
I don't think so.
Because there's
And-
blue balls that are completely pulled up right in the right of way along the ditch. How does that work? So I'm just tossing it out there. Pete will figure it out. But as I drive around town and saw all the tree damage, it was like tremendous.
What I will say is I really appreciate how Pete and his crew were able to clear the roads, not just of snow, but of debris in a very short order. So I agree with you, June, that the response that we had for this storm was really excellent.
Yes,
You know, and
Yeah.
it was, absolutely. All right, moving along to approval of minutes, warrants, and purchase orders.
We have
June wanted,
review of the town meeting warning.
oh yeah, look good. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, review of warning for the 2023 town meeting. Any questions on that? It
so I
looked-
think the only update that I've got is, let me share my screen. And this isn't really pertinent necessarily to town business, but we always include some information about the school budget.
Yep.
And I think it was the budget information meeting, I think the school wanted us to take out and then just put in some limited information about the budget annual meeting as far as the date and time. They don't have a location and the Google Meet sorted out just yet, I guess. They're going to have their whole other warning as well. So this is just sort of additional information, but that's the only change to this since I put it in the packet. It came through today from Linda. Other than that, yeah, would love some feedback if there's anything to change here. If not, we'll bring it back next meeting for a final vote.
So Josh, since this, those meetings, based on Duncan's email regarding the change in the law and that you have to have a physical location, starting what date? February something, 15th?
January 15th.
January 15th.
Yeah.
They will have to have a location, a physical location.
Yeah, and really, I think this wording, like Linda put it in there, sort of left over from last year where they didn't have a physical location, moved everything virtually. So we were kind of waiting on some feedback to say, all right, school and school board, what do you want to do here? So I think that the idea is we're going to keep the annual meeting and budget information meeting in with a date and time, and then they'll have a full warning for that meeting as well with the location to be And I think that one might have to be 100% in person, just because like our town meeting, you
Yeah.
can't vote virtually. So I think we're gonna kind of limit that information from the school though and let them, put more information into their own warning, but at least want to let people know sort of date and time.
And should it say then, and in-person option? Or something that they know?
Down here, yeah, I
Yeah.
think we should write something about in person, yeah. So, yeah, other than that, I think we've got the Saturday special or informational meeting put in there. We got our Zoom meeting. That one can't be attended virtually because there's no action being taken. We'll have a physical location for that. And then we've got the physical location for Monday night's meeting and the time. And we've removed the cannabis question, got the budget in there, got the bond, conservation fund question. So I think we're good, but wanted to make sure before we come back for a final vote.
And is the cannabis question, is there still time if there's a petition presented? That goes until the 29th, correct?
I think that goes till the 19th.
Oh, the 19th.
Yep, so the next scheduled select board meeting is the 17th, and then I think they have until the 19th to get in the petition, so.
Okay.
Yes, there still is time if the petition wanted to come in.
Has anybody seen a petition going around? I
No.
haven't.
For what?
A
I've not
petition.
heard of one, no.
Cannabis.
Oh, sorry.
Any questions on that?
Nope.
Okay. No vote on that, right, Josh? All right, now we'll move to approval of minutes, warrants, and purchase orders. Start with the minutes.
I move we accept the minutes of the December, what was it, 19th? 19th meeting.
This Bart, I will second that.
Thank you. Any discussion? Please state your name and your vote.
J.I.
Jeff, I.
Bart, aye.
David, aye.
June, aye. We don't have purchase orders, correct?
We have
one.
one that's
There
amended.
is, yeah,
The simple route
let
one.
me pull that up and explain a little bit more about that.
It was approved for $21,120, but it went up $650, so it needs to be amended to $21,780.
Thank you for that.
Yeah,
Oh, yes.
and
I
that's
do.
because we ended up adding, there was a laptop at Water and Sewer that wasn't
Right.
covered. And we're actively using that laptop, so we made sure we got that added on. So that's why I tried to show the amendment of how much it's gonna be per month, and then the new per year amount here for the next 6 months, and then the full amount that's gonna be coming in on this one. And this is a shared PO between Water and Sewer and admin, because but really the Water and Sewer is a PO that I could sign for, it's like $6,000. But just wanted to make sure we amend that and have the correct PO going forward.
Okay.
June, this is David. I move to amend purchase order 4447 to a new amount of $21,780, an increase of $650.
This is Jay, second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, please state your name and your vote.
This is J.I.
This is Jeff, I.
Bart, aye.
This is David, aye.
June, aye. And on to warrants. Questions?
I had some questions on invoices, if I
Okay.
can. One question I had is that we have several small invoices on tax sales. Are those sales, is that sales that went through, or are they just,
Legal
the
paperwork.
legal work around posting it?
Legal paperwork.
It's just around posting it, okay. And that's, do people go through tax sales if they, miss a tax payment by a day, or does it?
No, there,
Is it like, how long? does it
Oftentimes
take?
years.
Yeah,
There's
they have a lot of
maximum
time.
tax amount on the report, because people often get delinquent, and then there comes a point where they've missed enough chances.
It
Okay,
could be on a payment plan and then they stop doing the payment plan, those
Right.
kinds of things, so that it's like, I think it's, the minimum has been a year. I mean,
Right.
nobody's gone for tax sale if they were under a year.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but.
No, that's helpful. So their MSM is a company we bought that repaired a radio that was like, no, I'm mixing things up. MSM is the infrared camera for the fire department. That's a really cool piece of equipment that could be used for multiple purposes. It's
Energy efficiency.
it's energy efficiency. It's really a good tool for finding voids in insulation. So, you know, I might talk to the the fire chief about that someday. There was an invoice for a repair on a radio from United down near the end for $69. That seemed like way cheap for what they were doing. They had to tear the whole car apart in order to find out what the problem was. I'm wondering why it was so little. Do you know, Josh? Like, I mean, they had to, you know, they took apart the whole back seat of the car to find a screw that had gone into the antenna. You know,
I don't know why. I have to follow up with Pete though and find out. Looks like it was a highway radio.
you know, it's just a point of information. I
Yeah,
was impressed that they did that much work for $69. I wonder if because it didn't sound like a warranty thing. And my last comment was one of the is it Waxsuit that we get our fuel from?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Oh, it sure is.
one of them was for the mower. Right, which I'm assuming was used for plowing sidewalks. Is that the piece of equipment that's used for plowing sidewalks? And is it gasoline?
It
or
is.
It's gasoline? Because we were paying $4.49 a gallon for that. Was that just because, whereas, for the cars, we're paying more like $3.50, $3.70.
Diesel costs more.
The mower needs premium. I'm imagining
is?
it's probably non-ethanol, so it's more.
Okay,
We've been
Wouldn't
looking
it
into
take
getting
diesel?
nuclear
You
one,
know?
yeah, that would, I think. that
but
would be
the AC has got some rules. that-
Solar, it should be solar. Okay, that's it. I'm sorry for the detail.
No, thank you.
I had a question on quadrant, but I just wrote it down quadrant, so I don't know what that question is. Can you go to that?
No, they didn't charge us a late fee.
Quadrant?
Which is surprising.
Wex, you mean Wex?
No, Quadrant. They're the
Oh.
postage meter, and they usually charge us those additional fees, which I think Linda's gotten some of those waived.
That's right.
Right.
Didn't we talk at
They didn't
a past meeting that we were gonna look at other options besides quadrant?
Yes,
Yeah, I don't know that anybody's had a chance to look into other options at this point, but it would be on the list of things to look into because
Okay.
they're not great.
And then the Walmart receipt is not legible.
Yeah, if you look at the packet, it looks like it went to the wash or something maybe. If you look at the hard copy packet, I'm trying to find here in the scan. The hard copy packet wasn't super legible either, but you could at least make it out. But I agree, I'm sure the scan copy, I reviewed the hard copy, here it is. Yeah, it's, I'll share the screen. You can almost make it out. It's a little better on the real copy. So when you look here, you can,
Yep,
if you
it is a
zoom in,
little
it's
better. Yes.
3298. And the copy that David has in the room, not much better, but a little bit. So yeah, I'm not sure what rated that receipt, but it's seen better days.
And then we have multiple Cargill bills. And
What kind did she say?
Cargill.
it's, but Josh, before you scroll all the way up, for
Yeah.
whatever reason, it's at the bottom.
Oh, Cargill. Oh, right, because they have like a holding company name, right? There
Well,
we
it
go.
says just Cargill and it comes in at the bottom instead of C, and that was a bit like concerning to me. I don't know why.
There
but-
might be, yeah, I think sometimes they like change their, I'm not sure. I know sometimes they change names and they still invoice this way. So this one, let's see, it looks like we had a couple, two of them,
Three?
or
Three, I think.
five more, was it three? Three, yep. So I can double check with Pete, but it looks like he's sort of stocking up and making sure we're filled with.
Okay,
with
that was
road
my
salt.
question that we had. so many all at the same time.
Yeah, I think he's just, I mean, knowing also there could be some shortages potentially coming down the pike, I think he's wise to
Yes.
get stocked.
And this is the only provider available, right?
Correct.
This is the one, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right, that's all I had.
This is David, move to approve.
There's a
Is
second.
Jeff second?
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, please state your name and your vote.
J, I.
Jeff, I.
Bard, I.
David, aye.
And June, aye. Okay, discuss items for next agenda.
Do we want to talk about emergency shelters?
Yeah. Yes.
I don't know that we'll be prepared at our next meeting, just because I think that we're gonna need to do some
Prep.
work on reaching out to the emergency management to see if they can kind of guide us. But I don't know, Josh, do you think you have time to do that?
No, I agree. I think we've had a number of items. They're all good items to get to, but there's only so much time to get to all of them. And I think
Right.
that one is going to require some more research, both with what the school has as well as what best practices are to figure out what our plan is going to be.
Okay,
That makes sense.
I have one.
Placement of the radar signs, are we ready for that?
I think you do some planning on that too.
Maybe.
we have planning to do on that, so
February.
February would
Yeah.
be good.
I have one. Can I toss it out?
sure.
I have a request that the select board look at updating your purchase order system to go electronic, to be more sustainable, go paperless, and to not have, it's not as efficient to have to try to figure out what somebody's handwriting is on those written purchase orders. And I believe those purchase orders have to be delivered to the town center so that Josh can include them and scan them and put them in the pack, or Connie, whoever does that. And I also recommend that you want the system to be electronic for receipts, like that Walmart receipt. If you train your staff to take a picture of the receipt and submit the picture versus having to worry about tracking and finding receipts and having receipts go through the wash. So I really strongly recommend that you look at updating and look to move paperless. And
Thank you, Kara.
less-
I think I brought that up more than a year ago
It was
because,
more than a year ago, correct,
Yeah.
but now put it on your agenda so you can actually do it.
yeah,
The thing is, interpreting the hand scratching on the invoices, that's like the second most fun part of being on the select board. I would miss that.
Oh, good times. Yeah.
there
We'll
was
make sure people write you notes.
Josh, what was the conversation around not doing electronic?
Been a bit, but as I recall, I think it was, I think there was it was some sort of a, how did it go? I think there were
My-
complications involved that it wouldn't like jive super well. I can look back. I don't remember all. I know there were issues with doing it though. And I'm sorry, I'm sort of stumbling over my words.
No worries.
But I do remember there were some challenges that were in place that we could revisit and see if there's ways to overcome those. But again, we might need to have a conversation about priorities of what we can get to.
Yeah.
And if that's a highest priority, with lots of other ideas that have come out at all these meetings recently.
Yes. That could, though, make someone's job significantly easier, but
Potentially, yeah. If we really get it into place, and it could be wonderful. It's just a matter of research, figuring it out, implementation.
so
That's-
Josh,
that's
when
what
we
it
meet
is.
on Monday, can we also talk about this? I
That'd be
mean,
great.
Friday. On Friday.
Yeah, I'd love to. That'd be good.
Okay, perfect. We'll add
You
that.
know,
to
my,
it.
my guess is it looks to me like the way the Connie puts, or you, Josh, put the invoices together is alphabetical. And it might be hard to do that if you've got a whole bunch of different, they're all alphabetical. And I don't know whether that's necessary or not, but
She's talking just
I know,
purchase
I'm not
orders.
talking invoices, just the
Just
purchase
purchase
order.
orders.
Right.
You're looking at invoices, I'm
Purchase
talking
order
purchase orders.
system is manual.
I thought you said receipts.
The receipts of the Walmart, yeah, the Walmart is a
That's what I'm
receipt.
talking about.
It
Those
can
are,
be a picture.
Okay, but the way she puts it together is all alphabetical.
And Walmart can still be in Walmart, it doesn't have to be a piece of paper.
We
it
can
be a
figure this
electronic
out.
file. Because you're creating a PDF,
Right. And then,
correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so no need for a meeting in 2 weeks. Just kidding. There'll be other items that come up.
When are you gonna talk about the Tesla again?
That's a good question.
I had a good conversation with Kyle today about the Tesla.
How about you put it on your agenda again?
Is there
Well-
a need to sell this right away?
There's discussion in the community that I'm bringing it forward for, and it's not just Carol Bounty here. And so rather than have people go at things in a manner that isn't appropriate, I would rather have it be select board agenda items that are discussed in the public.
Are we ready to have that conversation at our next meeting
Sure,
with a decision?
sure.
Okay.
Well,
If
what,
we make a decision,
I-
if there's a vote on it, we'll put it on the agenda.
So it-
Right. You three.
Well, can it be a discussion to determine if you need to vote on it, or,
We've had discussions around it. Now we have to, I mean, we can
Right.
discuss it more,
I thought
but
it got tabled, that was all.
No, I don't get it. I think what we decided is that we would, when we needed to talk about this is whether or not we need to buy another car, in December of 2023.
And I brought up the discussion because the Tesla could have its highest value now. And if we could get a vehicle for the cost of the 8,500 that's already been banked from the vehicle sale of number 7, along with the trade-in of the Tesla, we could get a potential EV UV.
well,
We've already decided not to buy a car.
implicit in that, though, it strikes me, is if we're keeping a vehicle just to keep it in the parking lot,
Correct.
it's not a great financial decision.
Covered.
We're either keeping it for a
Absolutely.
reason or we shouldn't keep it.
Right.
Correct.
absolutely. That's absolutely true.
Please put it on
Let's
the
put it
agenda.
on the agenda.
I second.
What's that?
Move to adjourn.
We're not there yet.
Oh, come on.
We're gonna add that to the agenda. Anything else for the agenda?
There might have been some other ones today that I did not write down.
Josh, did you,
Um,
did Josh have
so
some?
there may be stuff that we have that's followed through, but Josh will have them, right?
yeah,
Oh,
I've
yeah.
got a running list from the meeting. I think I've already
Yeah.
got 4 or 5 things that need to get on next week or next agenda anyway. So don't worry, we will have plenty of things to talk about, more than a PO system and a Tesla. I guarantee you.
Okay, thank you. And there is no need for an executive session tonight, correct? All right, now we will entertain.
Adjourn.
Adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. Please state your name and your vote.
Say aye.
Jeff, aye?
Bard, aye.
David, I.
June, I.
All right, thanks. David, if you could just have everybody sign the items in the manila folders, there should be 3 folders.
We
And then
already
All done.
Oh, you guys are awesome. June, I will email you the 1 PO via DocuSign so that you can do that.
Perfect.
And then that's the only thing that's going to go out on DocuSign. And thank you all for making accommodations so I could stay isolated from you while my family has COVID and I somehow do not.
I hope you don't get it. Stay
Yeah,
well.
me too.
Yeah.
I'm hoping I'm a super dodger. See you, everybody.
See ya.
Thanks,
Good night.
everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.